A security camera at this front door caught something no one can explain. Two sisters walk up to the house. Right before they go inside, they notice something sitting near the entrance. A shopping cart filled with old, worn-out dolls. They slow down for a second and look at it. One of them steps a little closer, like she's trying to figure out where it came from. Then they both turn and go inside.
We just need to go in and get your something. I don't know. Shut up. Hurry up, hurry up.
I don't come to your house and mess with your shit, so don't mess with mine.
A few seconds later, someone walks up to the door, but that's not the part people focus on. While everything is happening inside, the camera picks up something else. In the background, near the hallway, a dark shape moves across the frame. It's quick, too quick to clearly make out. It doesn't move like a person and then it's gone. A little later, it shows up again, this time outside the house, near the same spot. Neither of the girls noticed it at the time. They only saw it after watching the footage back. Now they refuse to stay there alone. Watch closely. What do you think that is? A woman runs into the ocean and within seconds she can't get back out. This was filmed at a beach in Cabo San Lucas, right in front of a large resort. It looks normal at first. People are walking nearby, waves are coming in steady, nothing extreme. Then everything changes. This section of beach has a steep drop right at the shoreline. The sand falls away fast, so waves don't roll in gently. They hit hard, then pull straight back into deeper water. The woman runs in and stops right where the waves are breaking. She sits down at the edge. The first wave hits her and pushes her backward. When it pulls away, it drags her slightly with it. She tries to stay in place, but she's already off balance. She can't keep her balance. Another wave hits. This one lifts her higher, then drops her into the water. When it pulls back, her body shifts again, a little farther from where she started. Each wave pulls her farther. She's not swimming. She's not moving away from the impact zone. She stays right where the waves are strongest, getting hit over and over. People nearby start to react. A few men run into the water to help her. As soon as they step in, you can see the problem. The sand under their feet gives way quickly, just like it did for her. They stumble almost immediately. One of them reaches for her arm, but a wave crashes into all of them at once. It knocks them sideways and breaks their grip. They try again, but the timing is off. The waves keep hitting before they can get control. They're losing control. The water keeps pulling back between each wave, forcing them to fight just to stay upright. One rescuer braces himself, planting his feet, while another tries to lift her up, but she's not helping much. She keeps adjusting her clothes and shifting her position instead of standing up or moving with them. That slows everything down. Another wave hits, harder this time. It pushes all of them back again. For a moment, it looks like they might all get dragged out together. Then one of them manages to grab her under the arm and pull her forward. Another helps from the side. They time it between waves and drag her toward the sand. Step by step, they get her out of the impact zone. Once they reach flatter ground, the pull weakens. They're able to get her fully out of the water. She survives. No official information was released about who she was. There were no follow-up statements or reports, but the video spread quickly online. Locals began pointing out the same thing. This stretch of beach is known for a strong shore break. The drop-off is steep and the waves hit with direct force. There's no gradual entry. Even small waves can knock someone down and pull them out. And once you're in that zone, getting back out takes effort and timing. From a distance, it looks safe. Up close, it isn't. Imagine driving down a pitch-black Montana highway at night only to have a massive, shaggy figure suddenly materialize in your headlights. For 44-year-old Randy Lee Tenley, this was the exact reaction he was hoping for. He wasn't a hunter and he wasn't a soldier on a training exercise. He was standing on the pavement of Highway 93, wearing a full-body camouflage ghillie suit, a garment specifically designed to make a human being invisible. On the night of August 26, 2012, near the shores of Flathead Lake, that invisibility worked far too well. First responders who arrived at the scene of a reported collision found Tenley's body on the asphalt. The sight was immediate and confusing. A man dressed from head to toe in thick synthetic moss and grass-like fibers. In the dark, against the backdrop of the Flathead National Forest, he would have been virtually indistinguishable from the brush. However, Tenley wasn't in the brush. He was in the right-hand lane of the southbound highway. The investigation into why a man would stand in traffic dressed as a forest spirit quickly moved away from hunting. Tenley carried no weapon, no tags, and no traditional gear. The explanation provided by his friends was far more eccentric. Randy was attempting to stage a Bigfoot hoax. He wanted to go viral before going viral was even a standard term. The plan was simple and, in his mind, harmless. He would linger near the shoulder, let a few drivers catch a glimpse of a Sasquatch in their peripherals, and vanish into the woods before the authorities could be called. He wanted to create a local legend, but the physics of the situation were unforgiving. A 15-year-old girl driving down the highway never saw him, because the ghillie suit is designed to break up the human silhouette and absorb light. Tenley was a ghost until the moment of impact. The initial strike was devastating, but the tragedy didn't end there. As Tenley lay in the roadway, a second vehicle driven by a 17-year-old also failed to see the camouflaged figure and struck him again. By the time the dust settled, Randy Lee Tenley was gone. The story might have ended there, as a bizarre cautionary tale about the dangers of urban legends, if it weren't for a discovery made later by internet sleuths. On July 18, 2012, about 5 weeks before the accident, a curious thread appeared on 4chan's random board. An anonymous user posted a brief, confident message. "Hey B, don't ask me how I know because I cannot tell you, but I have it on good authority that Bigfoot will be undeniably proven to exist by the end of August. It's all over. He's real. How does that make you feel? Anyone currently a believer?" At the time, the post was likely ignored as typical internet noise, but looking back, the timeline is chillingly precise. The user didn't just guess that Bigfoot would be spotted, they set a deadline, the end of August. Randy Tenley stepped onto that highway on August 26. Whether Randy was the original poster himself or a friend was trying to prime the audience for his discovery, the connection is hard to ignore. He wasn't just pulling a prank for a laugh, he was likely trying to fulfill a prophecy he had already put into writing. He wanted to be the proof the world was waiting for. Instead, he became a permanent part of the very highway he tried to haunt. It leaves you wondering how many other proven mysteries are just people standing in the dark, waiting to be seen. In May 2025, a girl posted a video that quickly spread across social media. That night, she and her boyfriend were driving home from a concert in California. It was late, the road was empty, and their dashcam was recording as they made their way down a dark stretch of highway. At first, nothing looks unusual. Then something appears in the middle of the road, but it's not there right away. As the car gets closer, the figure suddenly becomes visible, like it wasn't there a second before. It's standing still, directly in their path. There's no movement, no reaction, just a person-shaped figure in the middle of the road. They don't understand what they're seeing, and neither does anyone else who's watched the footage. Some people say it's just a trick of the camera. Others think it's something else entirely. Watch closely. How does something appear like that without being there first? July 27, 2020, Chongqing, China. Everything looked normal. Then the ground disappeared. Two women were walking on a sidewalk and in less than a second, they were gone. They were near the Wuzhang Second Bridge in Chongqing's Wulong district. Nothing looked out of place. No cracks, no warning signs. Then it collapsed. They didn't trip. They didn't react. There was nothing under them. Both women dropped straight into the ground as the pavement gave way beneath their feet. This had been building for weeks. The summer of 2020 brought some of the worst flooding China had seen in decades, affecting more than 63 million people. In Chongqing, weeks of heavy rain had soaked the ground, but the real damage was happening underground, and no one could see it. Water had been eroding the soil beneath roads and sidewalks. From above, it looked solid. Underneath, it was already hollow. By the time those women stepped onto this section, it was already gone. A nearby security camera captured everything. The footage shows both women walking side by side at a normal pace with no hesitation and no signs of danger. Then it happens. The ground drops out in less than a second. The pavement caves in, and both women fall straight down into a deep hole. One moment they're walking, the next they're completely out of sight. People nearby ran over and looked down. One person said, "You can't even see them." Emergency crews arrived quickly. Firefighters used ladders and ropes to get down into the collapse, moving carefully through debris to reach them. Both women were still alive. One had a crushed foot from falling debris. The other had a head injury. They were pulled out and taken to the hospital. Their identities were never released, and no updates were made public after that. But once the video spread online, it raised bigger concerns. People started pointing out how often sinkholes like this were happening in major cities. Many blamed rapid construction and weak underground infrastructure, especially during extreme weather. And this wasn't an isolated case. Just 6 months earlier, in January 2020, a sinkhole in Shining swallowed a bus. A retired police officer named Zhang Hong ran toward the scene after hearing people scream. He saw someone hanging onto the edge and reached out to help. Then it collapsed again. The ground gave way under him and several others trying to help. 6 people died in that incident. The same problem caused what happened in Chongqing. The only difference was timing and luck. Without that footage, this would have been just another short report, but the video shows how fast it really happens. 1 second, everything looks normal. Then it collapses, and there's no time to react. A man who lives alone started noticing something strange in his house. Every time he came home from work, his dogs were acting differently. They were restless, on edge like something had scared them while he was gone. After a while, he decided to set up a security camera to see what was happening overnight. One night around 4 a.m., the camera recorded something he wasn't expecting. At first, everything looks normal. The room is quiet, the dogs are inside their cages. Then without warning, one of the cages suddenly moves. It doesn't slide a little, it's pulled forward with force. The dog inside immediately jumps out and starts looking around the room, trying to figure out what just happened. But there is nothing there. After a few seconds, the dog slowly backs away and then hesitantly goes back into the cage. There's still nothing visible in the room. The man didn't notice any of this until he reviewed the footage later. Now he's trying to understand what could have moved that cage. Watch it closely. What do you think caused that? The water suddenly surges over the promenade and people are still standing there filming. This is North Beach in Durban, South Africa, March 12, 2017. You can see crowds lined up along the edge, phones out, people watching the waves roll in. At first it looks manageable. It doesn't look dangerous yet. The water pushes forward, spills over the walkway, then pulls back. People step away, then move right back in. Some are laughing, some are just recording. Then another wave comes in, bigger this time. It crashes over the promenade force, pushing water across the concrete and into nearby areas. You can see people stumbling as it hits their legs. They're not expecting how strong it hits. Some try to hold their ground, others turn and start backing up, but many stay right where they are, focused on their screens. Then it hits again. A surge rolls in faster and higher than the others. It slams into the front of the crowd and keeps going. Water rushes across the walkway, carrying debris with it. People lose their footing. Some get knocked sideways, others fall completely. You can see bodies getting pushed along the ground as the water moves through. They can't stay standing. The surge reaches past the promenade now, flooding into the beachfront parking area. Sections of the walkway start breaking apart. Heavy structures shift. Underground pipes are exposed as the ground gives way. It's no longer just waves, it's force. This wasn't random. 5 days earlier, Cyclone Inawo hit Madagascar. The storm pushed energy across the Indian Ocean, building large swells heading toward South Africa's east coast. On top of that, this happened during a spring high tide around 4 p.m. That combination made everything worse. Waves were reaching up to 10 feet, hitting the shore with more power than usual and traveling farther inland than people expected. Warnings were already in place. Lifeguards were on the promenade. The beach had been closed. The officials were telling people to stay back, but hundreds of people stayed. You can see it clearly in the footage. People standing right at the edge waiting for the next wave recording it. Then another surge hits. This one breaks through a section of the crowd. A young girl standing on a concrete pier with her family is struck directly. The wave lifts her and pulls her into the water. She disappears instantly. Lifeguards react fast. A rescue boat is launched. They reach her and bring her back. Paramedics begin working on her right there, but it's not enough. She doesn't survive. 17 more people are taken to the hospital with serious injuries. Over 100 people need help. More than 35 lifeguards are deployed across the area, pulling people out, treating injuries, trying to control the situation. It turns into a mass rescue. Photographer Craig Dove, who was there filming, summed it up simply. A big one just rolled through, and that's exactly what it looked like. Wave after wave, each one stronger than the last, hitting people who didn't move in time. After the footage spread online, a lot of the focus shifted away from the waves and onto the crowd, because the signs were already there. Water was already coming over the promenade. The waves were getting stronger. The warnings had been given, but people stayed, phones up, waiting for a better shot. And by the time the biggest surge hit, it was too late to react. On March 18, 2011, a post appeared on 4chan's paranormal board that would spark one of the most unsettling mysteries in the site's history. It started when an anonymous user, known as the OP, posted a photo of a jagged, dark opening in a concrete basement wall. It looked like someone had hand-dug a hole into the earth behind the house. The OP said they had just found it and had no idea how deep it went. They had a light on an extension cord but no actual flashlights, and they asked the board for advice on whether they should go inside. At first, the reaction was typical for 4chan. Most users assumed it was a fake or a staged creepypasta. However, the intrigue grew when reverse image searches came up empty. There was no record of this photo anywhere else on the internet. The OP promised to go in and document the exploration. They posted a quick update. "We're going exploring and taking pictures on the way. We'll check back as long as we're not dead." A few minutes later, a second update appeared. The OP claimed they had gone halfway through the tunnel and saw something that made them turn back for more gear. They promised to post more photos shortly, but that was the last time the OP ever posted. Suspicion immediately filled the thread. Users pointed out a major flaw. If the OP had never been in the tunnel before, they wouldn't know where halfway was. As the hours passed with no sign of the OP, the board began to mock the situation, assuming it was a failed prank or that the person had simply logged off. But just as the thread was about to die, a different user posted a gruesome image that changed everything. The photo showed the mutilated remains of a woman. It was meant to be a dark joke, a way of saying the OP had been killed in the tunnel. It was a standard disgusting 4chan response until a user named Gozier replied. He wasn't trolling. He asked where the picture came from because he was convinced the woman in the photo was his missing ex-girlfriend. He explained that she had vanished years ago without a trace. They hadn't broken up. She had just dropped off the face of the earth. Because the original thread wasn't archived properly, the actual gore photo is gone, but the descriptions from those who saw it are vivid. The woman in the photo was missing her eyes and her lips. Despite the damage, Gozier saw specific features he recognized. At first, the board didn't believe him, but his reaction seemed too visceral for a simple prank. He posted that he was losing his mind and had already emailed the picture to the police in the city where she originally went missing. He said he felt like he was going to vomit. The skeptics began to back off. A small group of users decided to help him analyze the photo. They looked at the dead foliage in the background and decided it was likely winter when the photo was taken, but the decomposition of the body suggested she had died during a warmer month. They asked Gozier when his girlfriend had disappeared. He told them the last time they spoke was in August of 2008. The timeline was a close match. Some users warned him that the photo might be an old one from a gore thread that predated 2008, meaning it couldn't be her. He said he never visited those parts of the internet and prayed the photo was old, which would mean she might still be alive. He mentioned his own family situation was difficult. Her mother had dementia and her father had vanished years earlier. simply walking out one day and never returning. His only contact had been her brother, but he claimed the brother had died the previous year. To prove he was serious, Naeem Gozir eventually posted 2 partially censored pictures of his ex-girlfriend from when she was alive. The internet detectives on the board compared the living photos to the dead photo. The similarities were hard to ignore. They noted the jawline and body type were a near perfect match. Then they found a very specific detail. In the gore photo, the bridge of the dead girl's nose had a distinct bump. They asked Naeem Gozir if his ex had that same feature. He confirmed she did. He also said the clothing on the body looked like items she owned. There was even a tattoo on the hip of the corpse that appeared to be in the exact same spot as a tattoo his ex-girlfriend had. By this point, the threat had shifted completely. It wasn't about a basement tunnel anymore. It was about a possible murder victim. The board advised Naeem Gozir to move the investigation to a separate blog since 4chan threads disappear so quickly. He set up a Tumblr page. For a few weeks, he used the page to provide updates on his talks with the police. He posted 2 more censored photos of his ex, giving the public a better look at her. Then in April 2011, he posted a short update saying he was back in town, and a bigger update was coming that night. But that update never happened. He went silent for an entire month. When he finally returned to Tumblr in May, the tone of his writing was completely different. He claimed he had lost his login info and had spent the month traveling to her hometown. He said he tracked down a friend who told him the ex was planning to move out of state. Then he claimed he found marriage records from 2009 in her name in another state. Most surprisingly, he said the brother he thought was dead was actually alive. He said the brother was shocked to hear from him but refused to talk about his sister. This sudden shift felt wrong to everyone following the story. The dead brother was suddenly alive and the missing girl was supposedly married and living elsewhere. It felt like a forced ending that ignored the evidence they had already seen. The users who had helped him identify the body were now the ones who were suspicious. They wondered if he was being threatened or if the whole thing had been a lie. The last 2 posts on the Tumblr were the most disturbing. They were repetitive and frantic. He told people to stop calling him and to leave him alone. He wrote "quit" and "stop" dozens of times. The very last post said it was finally quiet. The screaming had stopped and he could finally go to sleep. After that, he vanished from the internet. There are a few ways to look at what happened. One is that the entire thing was a hoax. The person who found the tunnel, the person who posted the gore, and Naeem Gozir could have been the same person. This would explain the strange scripted ending on the Tumblr page. However, many people who were there felt the middle of the story was too detailed to be a total fabrication. Another theory is that Naeem Gozir was telling the truth at the start. He really did have a missing ex and saw resemblance in that photo. In this version, his Tumblr was eventually hacked by someone who wanted to give the story a creepy ending. There is also the possibility that he did get a response from the police, and they confirmed the woman in the photo was not his ex-girlfriend. Relief might have caused him to shut down the search, or the authorities could have told him to stop posting details online to avoid hurting a real investigation. Regardless of what happened, the original images are gone. We can no longer check the nose bump or the tattoo ourselves. We only have the text archives of the people who were watching it happen in real time. The OP never came back to talk about the tunnel. Naeem Gozir never posted again to clarify what happened to his ex. All that's left is an empty Tumblr page and the archived posts from 2011. The final conclusion is that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They are meant to sit in the back of your mind when you're alone in your own basement, wondering what's behind the wall. The interceptor boat slams hard against the Pacific Chop. To the left, a gray metallic shape cuts through the water. It's a narco sub. It does not slow down. The water is rough. Waves are hitting the hull. Petty Officer Jonathan Mills watches the moving vessel. He sees the salt water washing over the low curved deck. He says, "It's gonna be hard to get on."
Este es Juanes Costas de los Estados Unidos. ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco ahora! ¡Auto su barco! ¡Auto su barco! It's gonna be hard to get on! ¡Auto su barco!
This moment did not happen by accident. It began 12 hours earlier at 9:41 a.m. on June 18, 2019. A Navy P-3 surveillance aircraft scanned the Eastern Pacific, flew 200 miles west of the Colombia-Ecuador border. The sensor operator spotted a target moving north. It was a self-propelled semi-submersible. Cartels called them narco subs. These vessels are custom built to move massive quantities of drugs. They sit 90% below the waterline. They're designed to stay invisible to radar and human eyes. The aircraft sent the coordinates to the USS Monroe. The Coast Guard cutter was 250 miles away. Captain James Estramonte gave the order. The Monroe hit 25 knots. The chase lasted 10 hours. Inside the sub, 5 men traveled north. They weren't watching anything. They were eating store-bought snacks and drinking soda. They sat on 17,000 pounds of cocaine. The sub was 40 feet long. It was painted to blend with the gray-blue water. It was a white whale. These vessels are rarely captured. Most are never found. The Monroe finally closed the distance as the light faded. They launched 2 interceptor boats from the stern. A helicopter moved into position overhead for armed overwatch. The boarding team was in the water. They faced a specific threat. Smugglers have a staining plan for when they are caught. They open a scuttling valve. They sink the sub. They take the drugs to the bottom of the ocean. If it sinks, the mission is a failure. The evidence disappears. The Coast Guard has less than 2 minutes to act once the sub begins to take on water. The team on the small boat shouted in Spanish, "Alto su barco." The sub ignored the command. It kept moving. The interceptor boat pulled alongside the sub stern. Engine noise drowned out the waves. Spray blinded the crew. The 2 vessels were inches apart. If they touched, the small boat could flip. If a guardsman fell between them, they would be crushed. Mills made the decision. He did not wait for a ladder or a calmer sea. He saw the gap and leaped. Now Mills is on the hatch. He is shouting. He is hammering. Back on the Monroe, Captain Estramonte listened to the radio. He could not see the video yet. He only heard the updates from the helicopter. First man on. Second man on. Boarding team has positive control. The tension was at the limit. The sub could dive at any moment. The smugglers could be armed behind the steel plate. The team on top had zero cover. They stood in the open ocean on a moving target. The hatch moved. It cracked open. A single hand came out first. It was empty. Then a head appeared. A suspect climbed out with his hands raised. All 5 men surrendered. They were pulled off the sub and onto the interceptors. The team moved inside the vessel. The hull was cramped. It smelled of diesel fuel and sweat. They found the cargo. 17,000 pounds of cocaine sat in the belly of the craft. The street value was $232 million. The mission did not end with the arrests. The crew had to unload the drugs. It took 12 hours of manual labor in the heat. Once the sub was empty, it remained a hazard to navigation. The crew decided to scuttle it. Even then, the vessel was stubborn. Captain Estramonte noted it did not go down easily. It was built to survive the deep ocean. This was one part of a larger deployment. During that mission, the Monroe crew stopped 14 smuggling vessels. They seized 39,000 pounds of cocaine and 933 pounds of marijuana. The total value reached $569 million. They arrested 55 smugglers across the Pacific. On July 11, the Monroe arrived at Naval Base San Diego. Vice President Mike Pence stood on the deck. He told the crew their service was saving American lives. Jonathan Mills received the Coast Guard Medal. It is the highest non-combat award for heroism the service gives. The video went viral because it stripped away the report-style wording. It showed speed, it showed the risk, it showed a split-second decision in a place where most people never go. The operation worked because one person stopped waiting. He did not wait for the sub to stop. He did not wait for the water to calm down. He jumped. Most people have no idea the Coast Guard operates at this level. This footage removed the excuse not to know. In the middle of the ocean, there is no room for hesitation. You act or the target is gone. Mills acted. The sub stopped. The drugs never reached the shore. He didn't wait. Hey, it's time. Those were the first words of a post that appeared on 4chan's random board, and for the first few minutes, nobody took them seriously. On an anonymous forum known for constant trolling and empty threats, a user claiming he was about to commit a high-profile crime usually isn't cause for alarm. Most people scrolling past likely thought it was just another person looking for attention or trying to shock a bored audience. But this time, the person behind the screen wasn't joking. The post was incredibly specific. The user identified himself as Neil McInnes and stated clearly that he was a student at New River Community College in Christiansburg, Virginia. He even went as far as to mention the school's proximity to Virginia Tech, a detail that added a heavy layer of attention given that area's history. He claimed the news never gets the details right, so he was providing them himself. He talked about the firearm he had brought with him, his lack of experience with it, and even included a link to a site where he intended to live stream the event. He ended the ran by linking to his own student portfolio, effectively unmasking himself before he had even stood up from his chair. He finished the post with a simple, chilling sentence: "I'm here at school writing this. Wish me luck." Just 3 minutes after that post went live, the situation transitioned from a digital threat to a physical reality.
Yo, there's a guy shooting at the New River Mall right now. He's shooting a shotgun at the mall right now.
Okay, stay on the line.
He told us to get out of the way. He said, leave now. He's just trying to shoot at the mall right now. He's shooting at the school right now.
You said at the NRV Mall, right?
At the NRV Mall, yes.
Okay, where is he at in the mall?
He's at the school right now. Everyone's running out of school right now. He's shooting at people right now.
Neil McInnes walked onto the New River Community College campus, which was uniquely located inside the New River Valley Mall. He wasn't there to attend class. He was there to follow through on the plan he had just outlined for a group of strangers online. As he began his attempt to attack those around him, his own admitted lack of experience became the only thing standing between his targets and a tragedy. In the initial moments of the confrontation, he struggled with the mechanics of his weapon. Reports indicate he actually forgot to disengage the safety while attempting to fire at his first few targets. That small technical error provided a vital window of time, a few seconds of confusion that allowed several students to recognize the danger and flee the immediate area. However, the danger didn't end there. Once he managed to get the firearm functional, he began moving through the campus. For the next 4 minutes, the mall was filled with the sound of gunfire and chaos as students and shoppers scrambled for cover.
Christiansburg 911, where's your emergency?
Hi, someone was trying to the New River Community College with a shotgun. Told everyone to run.
New River Community College with a shotgun?
Yes, ma'am.
During this window, 2 students were struck, Taylor Sharp and Christina Casagrande. Both suffered serious injuries as McInnes continued to search for more targets. The situation only came to an end when an off-duty security guard took action. Displaying immense composure, the guard managed to tackle McInnes and detain him before he could move deeper into the mall or find more victims. By the time the police arrived, the threat had been neutralized. The aftermath was a long road for everyone involved. Both Taylor and Christina faced months of difficult medical recovery, though fortunately both survived the attack. Neil McInnes was arrested at the scene and eventually faced the legal consequences of his actions. He was charged with 2 counts of malicious wounding and 2 counts of using a firearm in the commission of a felony. While his specific motivations remained a subject of debate, he eventually pleaded guilty to all 4 felony charges. The court sentenced him to 68 years in prison, with 30 of those years suspended, resulting in a 38-year active sentence. The events of that afternoon serve as a stark reminder of how quickly an anonymous post can turn into a real-world crisis, and how the quick thinking of those on the scene can be the only thing that prevents a worst-case scenario. A woman named Leah posted a video after something unusual started happening in her home. For several weeks, her daughter had been dealing with intense night terrors. Almost every night, she would wake up crying, sometimes refusing to go back to sleep. At first, it seemed like normal childhood nightmares, something a lot of kids go through, but one night felt different. Aaliyah was in her bedroom when her daughter suddenly ran in, crying harder than usual. She looked panicked, like she had just seen something, not dreamed it. Instead of brushing it off, Aaliyah picked up her phone and started recording, planning to show the footage to her daughter's doctor. She tries to calm her down, telling her everything is okay, that nothing is there, but her daughter isn't focused on her. She's staring past her, toward the window. Aaliyah turns the camera, and that's when it happens.
Don't be scared, baby. Come on, you pickle. Pickle. It's okay. There's the vent right there, baby. See? The vent pushes the door. You're fine, okay? You big girl? Don't be scared, just remember. Baby Lenny's here, mommy's here. We're all gonna be together in the same house. It's gonna be okay. Let's go to bed. What's wrong, Cora? What are you afraid of? You're scaring me, Emily. I don't see it.
The blinds begin to move, not just one section, all of them at the same exact time. Each part closes together in sync, even though they're controlled separately. There's no one near the window, nothing touching them, no visible movement that would explain it. For a moment, no one says anything. Aaliyah tries to explain it away in real time. She points toward a nearby vent, saying maybe it's just air pushing against the blinds. She's trying to keep her daughter calm, trying to keep herself calm, but something about it feels off. The next day, she records another video to show how the blinds actually work. Each section has its own rod. They don't move together. To close all of them at once, someone would have to physically stand there and adjust each one. There's no motor, no remote, no system connecting them. They aren't designed to move like that.
Physically standing by the blinds in order to close them like this, and also all 4 of them close at the exact same time. It's not electronic, it's not battery powered, it's not creepy. I'm trying my best not to freak out.
Then she brings up something else, the door. In another clip from that same night, the bedroom door slowly moves on its own. Some people suggested it could be airflow from the air conditioning, but Aaliyah checks the AC wasn't running. She even compares it to other recordings when the air is on. The sound is different, the movement is different, it doesn't match.
The AC was not on when the door closed. It's very loud. And you can hear it coming from the vent. The air vent could not have pushed this door closed in that other video because the air was not on, the AC was not.
Now she's left trying to figure out what actually happened. Her daughter is still afraid at night, still waking up, still refusing to sleep alone. And now after seeing the footage, Aaliyah isn't sure it's just nightmares anymore. She thinks her daughter might be seeing something she can't see. And if that's true, then whatever moved those blinds might still be inside the house. Watch closely. What do you think is actually happening here? The camera is fixed on an open plaza. The sun is bright and the area is quiet. In the center of the frame, a VIP stands motionless. He is surrounded by 4 men in dark suits. They don't have tactical gear or visible rifles. Their hands are clasped in front of them, and they look like any other high-level escort team. A few yards away, a crowd of people watches. The vibe is completely relaxed. Then a man starts to move. He's coming from the edge of the crowd, walking at a steady, casual pace. He looks like a fan. He looks like someone who just wants a handshake or a photo. There is no aggression in his posture, no sudden sprint. He simply closes the gap. As he reaches the edge of the security circle, his hand dips toward his pocket. It's a tiny movement. Most people wouldn't even see it, but the team does. In a single heartbeat, the man pulls out an object. It isn't a pen. The transition is instant. 1 second, the security detail is a loose circle of people. The next, they're a solid machine. They don't scramble. They don't panic. They transform. 2 men on the side launch forward. They don't just reach for the attacker. They erase the space between them. Their movement is explosive but perfectly controlled. While they hit the threat, the rest of the team collapses inward toward the VIP. They become a human wall, physically shielding him with their own bodies. The attacker is neutralized. He is pinned and stripped of the object before the viewer can even blink. The VIP is already being moved away, shielded from every possible angle. Then the sound hits. It isn't screaming. It isn't the sound of a crowd running for their lives. It's clapping. People are cheering. They are nodding in approval. They aren't terrified. They are impressed. That sound is the first real clue that your brain just lied to you. You weren't watching an assassination attempt. You were watching a sport. This footage was filmed in Bulgaria, a place with one of the most deep-seated security cultures in the world. What looks like a terrifying public attack is actually the Bodyguard Championship. It is a formal, multi-discipline competition where elite private security teams go head-to-head. They aren't just protecting a person. They are competing for a score. To understand why this video reached 10 million views, you have to look at how people first saw it. When this was uploaded, there was zero context, no subtitles, no explanation. Millions of people watched it and saw a real-world disaster being stopped by superhuman reflexes. People in the comments spent months debating who the VIP was. They argued about whether there were more attackers waiting in the crowd. They analyzed every frame, convinced they were seeing a masterclass in real-world survival. Some even claimed it had to be fake because no real team could move that perfectly under the pressure of a real gun. They were half right. It was a setup, but not the kind they thought. In Bulgaria, private security is a massive industry. At one point, nearly 1 in every 11 working men in the country was employed in security. This competition is the peak of that professional world. The teams are judged on a range of grueling tests. They have to find hidden bombs under cars. They have to show precision during high-speed chases, and they have to master the walking escort, the exact scene you see in the clip. A referee calls the start. Trained assistants play the attackers, using fake weapons to test the team's reaction time. A panel of judges sits nearby with clipboards. They aren't looking for drama. They are looking for clean execution. Did the team keep the formation? Did they cover the VIP's head? How many seconds did it take to pin the threat down? Once the internet figured out this was a competition, the audience changed. The mystery seekers left, and the professionals moved in. Security experts started using the clip as a training tool. They broke down the footwork and the hand placement. The video stopped being a viral mystery and became a masterclass. It proves that under extreme pressure, you don't rise to the occasion, you sink to the level of your training. These men didn't react because they were surprised. They reacted because they had practiced this exact move 1,000 times. The threat was a drill. The precision was real. In protection, if you have to think, you've already lost. The team didn't think, they just moved. The mystery started with a strange discovery inside a standard software case. A user on 4chan's paranormal board claimed that his father had purchased a specialized engineering program at a computer expo in Rochester, New York. When they opened the case, they found more than just the engineering software. Tucked inside was a second, unlabeled CD. There was no branding, no title, and no instructions. Just a digital file titled Station. Initially, the find seemed like a typical tech curiosity, but the contents were anything but standard. The disk contained a game built in Blender, along with a collection of DLL files required to run it. When the user first shared the story, he didn't post a link. Instead, he asked people to reply with their email addresses so he could send the file directly. To the seasoned users of 4chan, this looked like a classic phishing scam or a simple way to spread a virus. However, 25 minutes later, the original poster returned with a public download link. After the community ran the files through antivirus software and confirmed they were clean, the exploration of Station began. The game itself was a first-person 3D experience with a very crude, unsettling aesthetic. It didn't have an intro or a menu. Booting it up dropped the player immediately into a desolate landscape. The environment consisted of an empty warehouse, some gas tanks, and a dark road lined with low-resolution trees. Nearby, a pier stretched out into nothingness. The entire experience was underscored by a repetitive droning audio track that set a heavy tone for the gameplay. For the first few minutes, nothing happened. The player was free to wander the small, restricted map, but eventually a loud noise would trigger, and the entities would appear. These were floating, spherical faces that began to relentlessly chase the player. The mechanics were simple. If a face touched you, the game instantly crashed to the desktop. As time went on, the difficulty spiked, spawning multiple faces until the player was inevitably caught. On the surface, it looked like a basic, poorly made horror game, the kind of project a student might put together over a weekend. But 4 days into the investigation, a player noticed something hidden on one of the outer warehouse walls. It wasn't a texture glitch or a random decoration. It was a set of geographic coordinates. When these coordinates were entered into Google Maps, the mystery shifted from a weird piece of software to a real-world location. They pointed to a specific warehouse in the middle of Siberia, Russia. The location was incredibly remote, situated near the diamond mining town of MYUU. This town is famous for the MYUU mine, which is the second largest man-made excavation in the world, a massive gaping hole in the earth. The connection between the game and this location became even more grounded when users compared the in-game warehouse to satellite imagery of the real one. The layout was nearly identical. The discovery raised immediate questions. Why would a crude indie game found in New York point toward a high-security mining facility in Russia? MYUU isn't a typical tourist destination. It's a restricted area guarded by the military where outsiders are generally not permitted. This led to the realization that whoever developed Station likely had personal knowledge of or access to that specific Russian site. As the thread grew, the line between verified facts and internet legend began to blur. It's important to distinguish what was actually in the game from what was added by the community later. The coordinates on the wall were a confirmed part of the original file. However, in the months that followed, other clues emerged that were much harder to verify. For instance, one user claimed to have found an SSTV or slow scan television file buried in the game's code. SSTV is a method used to transmit images over radio waves. When decoded, this supposedly produced an image pointing to another set of coordinates in the Russian wilderness. Another user claimed to find a hidden URL for a site called searproinem.com. While that site did exist at one point, it appeared to be a password-protected repository for old military files and images of debunked UFO sightings. The owner of that site eventually claimed he just hosted the game because he thought it was interesting, not because he was part of a grand conspiracy. Because the game pointed to a restricted Russian military town, the theories started to get dark. Without any evidence, people began linking the Station game to shady medical research, human experimentation, or even organ trafficking. These theories were fueled by the entities in the game, those floating faces, which some interpreted as the spirits of victims or the results of failed experiments. However, there has never been a shred of proof connecting the software to any criminal activity at the MYUU site. So what exactly was Station.exe? If we look at the evidence realistically, two main theories stand out. The first is the Thomas theory. Some players noticed that the floating faces in the game bear a striking resemblance to the characters from Thomas the Tank Engine. The name Station could simply be a reference to a train station. In this version of events, the game was just a bizarre creepypasta project made by a fan of the show who happened to use a real Russian warehouse as a reference for his map. The second, and perhaps more likely theory, is that this was an abandoned alternate reality game or ARG. When tech-savvy users analyzed the game files, they discovered it was built using a version of Blender that hadn't been released at the time the original poster claimed his father bought the disc. This proved the bought it years ago at an expo story was a lie. It's possible the original poster created the game himself and tried to start a mystery, but when the community caught him in a lie about the timeline, he lost interest and walked away. Once the original creator went silent, other internet users likely stepped in to keep the flame alive. It's a common phenomenon in online mysteries. When a story starts to die, people discover fake clues like SSTV files or hidden websites to prevent the thread from reaching an anticlimactic end. 13 years later, and we still don't have a definitive answer. We have a game that accurately modeled a restricted building in Siberia, a set of coordinates, and a creator who vanished the moment he was questioned. Whether it was a failed art project or a genuine glimpse into someone's life in a closed Russian city, Station remains a digital artifact of a time when the internet could still turn a random CD into a global hunt for the truth. The warehouse is still there in MYUU, sitting in the shadow of the world's largest diamond pipe, but the person who put it in the game has never been heard from again. A group of friends who run a YouTube channel decided to investigate an abandoned hotel in Japan. Locals have always claimed the building is filled with moving shadows and figures after dark. When they first arrived, they walked through the halls for several minutes. For a while, nothing. They didn't find anything unusual. To cover more ground, they decided to split up and explore different sections of the hotel alone. While climbing a central staircase, one of the members caught something on his camera that he didn't see at the time. A dark figure appears on the landing above him, standing completely still. He pans the camera away for just a second to check its footing. For a moment, nothing. Then it's gone. When the camera moves back, the landing is empty. He had no idea he wasn't alone until he watched the footage later that night. After an hour of searching with no other sightings, the group tried something else. They set up stationary cameras in the hallways and left the building to let them run overnight. One of the cameras captured something else. At first, the hallway is empty, then something comes into frame. A pale face moves forward slowly and stops, staring directly into the lens for several seconds before pulling back into the dark. The group came back the next day to collect their cameras. The building looked exactly the same, empty, but after reviewing the footage, one thing was clear. They weren't alone in that hotel. What do you think was standing on those stairs? The camera inside the foundry is pointed straight at the furnace melt pool. It is a normal shift at an aluminum recycling plant. A forklift operator drives his machine toward the mouth of the furnace. He is carrying a sow, which is a heavy solid block of scrap metal. He lines up the forks, tilts the carriage, and drops a load into the liquid metal. The world turns white. In a fraction of a second, the furnace doesn't just splash, it detonates. A violent wall of fire and molten metal shoots out from the melt pool. It hits the ceiling and covers the entire frame. Liquid aluminum is burning at over 1200 degrees Fahrenheit. It sprays across the floor like rain. The forklift is instantly buried in a cloud of thick black smoke and heat. It looks like a direct hit. From this angle, it seems impossible for the driver to be alive. The metal is everywhere. It's on the floor, it's on the machine, and it's hanging in the air. Then the smoke shifts. The forklift starts to move. Through the haze of the explosion, the operator throws the machine into reverse. He doesn't panic, he doesn't jump out while the wheels are turning. He backs the forklift away from the furnace. He steers it to the side of the building and brings it to a controlled stop. He sets the brake, steps out of the cab, and walks toward the safety exit. He is completely uninjured. People who watch this footage are usually stunned by how calm the driver looks. He moves with a steady, deliberate energy. It looks like he's just finishing a routine task, not escaping a fireball. But foundry professionals who saw this clip know exactly what they are looking at. That driver wasn't being casual, he was being professional. In a foundry, panic kills. When molten metal reacts, it releases hydrogen and oxygen gases. Breathing those in can be fatal. The training is simple. You do not sit and stare at the disaster. You move the equipment to a clear zone, you park it so it doesn't block emergency crews, then you get yourself to fresh air. One tiny detail saved his life. If you look closely at the front of the forklift cab, there is a clear, thick plastic protective shield. Most viewers miss it because it's transparent, but that shield is the only reason the driver isn't covered in liquid metal. It took the full force of the splash. It was a physical barrier between the operator and a 600 degrees Celsius shower. Without that plastic sheet, the driver doesn't walk away. This security camera footage from March 2025 was posted by a woman named Brandy. She explained that late one night, she and her husband were suddenly woken up by strange noises coming from downstairs. At first, nothing. They stayed in bed, but the sounds didn't stop. The next morning, they checked the footage to see what had been moving through the house while they were asleep. It starts with a flash. A bright light begins pulsing inside the room, strong enough to wake the dog. The dog sits up immediately, staring toward the doorway. Then something appears. A pale face shows up right next to the doorframe. It stays there for a few seconds, then disappears back into the dark. Then something else happens. A small, dark figure steps into the frame. It stands there for a moment, completely still, before vanishing instantly. Brandy says she and her husband were the only people in the house that night, asleep upstairs. The doors were locked. Nothing was out of place, but the camera still caught something moving through the room. What do you think was standing in that doorway? A motorcycle cuts across traffic and forces a rider to stop. The sun is high over a crowded intersection in East Sao Paulo. A 35-year-old security guard named Anderson is riding his Honda Hornet through midday traffic. A camera is strapped to his helmet from his usual weekend rides. That camera captures everything. As he approaches the corner of Avenue Doutor Assis Ribeiro and Gabriela Mistral, a red motorcycle carrying two men swerves directly in front of him and cuts him off hard. He brakes immediately, but the bike hasn't even fully stopped before the passenger jumps off. The man moves fast, grabbing the left handlebar of Anderson's Hornet to lock it in place. Then he pulls a .38 caliber revolver and raises it, the barrel pointed straight at Anderson's face. Everything stops. The demand is simple. The bike. Anderson doesn't argue. He raises his hands, palms open, then slowly reaches down, pulls the keys from the ignition, and hands them over. He steps back, putting space between himself and the gun. It's quick, it's controlled, but it's not over. The robber, later identified as Escalante Leonardo Santos, swings his leg over the stolen Honda and tries to balance the bike while still holding the weapon. His focus is locked on the ignition and the escape. He thinks he's in control. He's wrong. Across the street, an off-duty military police captain named Antonio Bernardo is sitting in his car at a red light. From his position, he has seen everything. The cutoff, the gun, the handoff. He doesn't panic. He pulls the handbrake, unbuckles his seatbelt, and draws his weapon, keeping it low. Then he waits. This is the most dangerous moment. If he moves too early, the robber could turn and fire at Anderson. If he waits too long, the bike is gone. He watches carefully, waiting for one thing, the gap. For the first time, he is no longer right next to Anderson. That's it. The captain opens his car door and steps out. 2 shots. Sharp control. Santos is hit in the leg and the abdomen and drops instantly, collapsing onto the pavement. The Honda falls with him, scraping across the asphalt. The situation flips in a second. The accomplice doesn't stay. He twists the throttle and disappears into traffic without looking back. Now the street is quiet again. Santos lies on the ground, bleeding and disarmed. Anderson walks back toward his bike. The shock is wearing off, replaced by anger. He stands over the man who just pointed a gun at him. The camera picks it up clearly. "Go rob in hell, you punk. My bike will take you there." Police and emergency crews arrive soon after. Santos is taken to the hospital for surgery. He survives and is later charged with attempted aggravated robbery. The footage is reviewed by Sao Paulo military police, and the conclusion is clear. The captain's actions were legitimate. Frame-by-frame analysis shows that just before the shots, Santos had started to turn with a weapon. The threat was still active. Anderson uploads the video to thank the officer who stepped in, but the clip spreads fast. It's downloaded, re-uploaded, and viewed millions of times across different platforms. People don't just watch it for the robbery, they watch it for the timing. The robber was fast, the captain was patient, and that patience is what changed everything. He didn't rush the moment, he waited for it. Then he moved, and that was enough. In the early 2000s, the internet was a largely unregulated frontier. Hidden among the standard message boards and hobbyist sites were corners of the web dedicated to the darkest impulses imaginable. One of these places was a forum known as the Cannibal Cafe. While the site's administrators claimed the content was purely for roleplay and fantasy, the reality was much more literal. It was here in early 2001 that a user posting under the alias Frankie began a very specific search. His post was blunt and bypassed any pretense of fiction. He was looking for a young man, specifically between the ages of 18 and 25, who was willing to be killed and consumed. For several days, the post sat in the digital ether, a shocking request that most would dismiss as a dark joke or a cry for attention, while a few people initially responded to the thread. The gravity of the request eventually caused them to withdraw. All of them except for one man, a computer engineer named Bernd Brands. Unlike the other users on the forum, Brands wasn't interested in the fantasy of the act. He harbored a lifelong desire to be consumed, and in the user known as Frankie, he believed he had found someone willing to facilitate that end. The two began a private correspondence via email, moving away from the public forum to discuss the logistics of their meeting. Through these exchanges, Brands learned that his contact was actually a man named Armin Mewis, living in the quiet village of Rotenburg, Germany. On the evening of March 9, 2001, Bernd Brands arrived at Mewis' home. The events that followed are well documented because, according to later police reports, nearly every moment of the encounter was captured on a 4-hour VHS tape. The night began with a series of deliberate, increasingly violent acts, all of which were carried out with the full consent and participation of Brands. The situation began with an attempt to consume a part of Brands' body while he was still alive. Mewis attempted to comply with a specific request from Brands, but the initial attempt was unsuccessful. Eventually, they moved to the kitchen, where a portion of the body was prepared and cooked. However, the process did not go as planned, and the resulting meal was reportedly inedible. As the night progressed, Brands' physical condition began to deteriorate rapidly due to significant blood loss. MYUU eventually escorted him to a bathtub upstairs. To ease the process, MYUU provided Brands with a combination of alcohol and painkillers. While Brands lay in the tub, drifting in and out of consciousness, MYUU ended his life. What happened over the next few hours is one of the most unsettling aspects of the case. While Brands lay deceased in the bathroom, MYUU reportedly sat nearby and calmly spent several hours reading a novel. It wasn't until later that he began the process of dismembering the body. He worked with methodical precision, eventually moving the remains into a deep freezer where he stored them alongside ordinary groceries, such as frozen pizzas. Over the next 10 months, MYUU lived a double life. To his neighbors and co-workers, he was a quiet, unassuming man. In private, he followed through on his back with Brands, eventually consuming over 40 pounds of the remains. During this time, he frequently returned to the Cannibal Cafe forum. He began posting updates about his success, describing the events of that March night in clinical and boastful detail to the other users. The case only came to light because of the internet's inherent lack of true privacy. In December 2002, a college student in Innsbruck stumbled upon MYUU's posts. Unlike the other users who had ignored or encouraged the behavior, this student recognized the descriptions as a record of an actual crime rather than a fantasy. He contacted the police, providing them with the details and the username. The German authorities launched a raid on MYUU's home in Rotenburg. During the search, they discovered the remains in the freezer and the infamous videotape. MYUU was arrested immediately, but his trial created a massive legal controversy that gripped the German judicial system. Because Brands had been a completely willing participant and had traveled to the house specifically to die, there was a significant debate over whether the act constituted murder or killing on request, a much lesser charge in German law. Initial court proceedings led to a conviction of manslaughter, resulting in an 8.5-year sentence. However, this sparked a public outcry, and the case was eventually retired. In 2006, the court overturned the previous ruling, and MYUU was convicted of murder. The prosecution argued that he had committed the act for his own sexual gratification, which elevated the crime to murder regardless of the victim's consent. Armin MYUU remains incarcerated today, serving a life sentence in a facility in Frankfurt. Over the years, he has reportedly become a vegetarian and has spoken in various interviews about his past, though he maintains that he simply fulfilled a mutual agreement. As for the 4-hour videotape, it remains one of the most notorious pieces of lost media in existence. Because of its extreme and disturbing nature, the German government has strictly prohibited its release to the public. It has only been screened for a small number of people, including judges, lawyers, and forensic experts involved in the trial. Those who have seen it describe a document that is profoundly difficult to process, not just because of the visuals, but because of the calm, transactional nature of the entire event. The story of the Rotenburg cannibal is not a typical tale of a predator and a prey. It is a grounded, somber look at how a French digital subculture provided a platform for two individuals to realize a lethal obsession. It remains a case that challenges legal definitions of consent and stands as a permanent mark on the history of the early internet. A young man was filming a quick tour of his room at an isolated forest hotel. At first, everything looks normal. The space is quiet, the door is locked, and he is clearly alone. He pans the camera across the furniture and the bed, showing the layout of the small suite. Then the lens passes over a large mirror on the wall. That's when it happens. In the reflection, a woman with a pale face is sitting there, staring directly into the camera. But when the camera reaches that part of the room, the space is completely empty. There is no one on the chair and no one in the shadows. She only appears in the mirror. The man didn't see anything while he was recording. He only realized what was there after watching the footage back later that night. He says the room was empty and the door was locked. If she wasn't in the room, what was the mirror showing? Queso is leaning back in his chair, the glow of his monitors reflecting off his headset. He's in the middle of a classic stream, the kind his community of 60,000 live viewers lives for. The vibe is relaxed. He's deep into a story about his Aunt Judy, telling the chat about her trip to the local library to read to some kids. It's a low-stakes hometown tale. He's animated using his aunts, laughing at his own jokes, and the chat is scrolling so fast it's a blur of emotes and lulls. Everything feels normal. Then in the middle of a sentence, Case stops. He freezes. His eyes start toward the window behind his setup, just off camera. The laughter stops. The air in the room feels like it just changed. Chat, he says. His voice has dropped an octave. It's no longer the loud, booming personality everyone knows. It's quiet, it's real. I just saw a flashing green light at my window. He's staring at the glass now. The room behind him is dark, and the Arkansas night outside is pitch black. In a trailer out in the woods, a light at the window isn't just a distraction, it's a threat. He leans in closer to the monitor, his face tight with genuine concern, and as soon as I looked, he whispers. The flashing green light stopped, and I saw something move away from the window. The chat explodes. The scrolling blur turns into frantic wall of text. The lulls are replaced by W and mangas. Panic starts to ripple through the digital crowd. 10,000 messages hit the screen at once. Call the police, one viewer types in all caps. Get the gun, says another. Case, get out of there. Someone is swatting you. People are convinced. In a world where high-profile streamers deal with stalkers and home invasions, this isn't a joke anymore. 60,000 people are watching a potential crime happen in real time. Case stays frozen, his eyes locked on the dark pane of glass. He's looking for a silhouette. He's looking for anything that confirms a human being is standing 3 feet away from him in the dark. The silence on the stream is deafening. For a solid 10 seconds, nobody breathes. Case is bracing himself. He's thinking about the long hours he spent working maintenance for his dad's landscaping company before this fame, back when the only thing he had to worry about was a declining debit card at Family Dollar. Now he's a target. He's the content creator of the year, and someone is outside his house with a camera. He leans toward the window, squinting into the blackness. He's looking for a person. He's looking for a stalker. Then he sees it. It's not a camera. It's not a flashlight. It's not a person. It's a single small insect hovering inches from the glass. It's a firefly. The green glow pulses one more time, soft, natural, and completely harmless. The movement he saw away from the window was just the bug drifting into the yard. Case sinks back into his chair. The tension drains out of his shoulders so fast, he looks like he's melting. He puts his head in his hands and lets out a breath he has been holding for 2 minutes. In the world of live content, there are no scripts, there is no take two. You're either for what's coming or you're caught on camera reacting to a bug. Case found his composure, pulled his headset back up, and went right back to the story about Aunt Judy. The stream moved on, but the clip lived forever. It was a reminder that when you're live, the smallest light can cast the biggest shadow. The bug didn't break in, but it sure broke the internet. Relief is a powerful thing. A man named Carter had only been living in his new rental for a few days when the house began to push back. It started with small, strange noises, but late one night, the activity escalated. Carter woke up to a bizarre rhythmic sound echoing from the living room. It was a piano. He got out of bed to investigate, moving cautiously toward the source of the music.
Who's there?
But as soon as he approached the living room doorway, the piano suddenly stopped. The silence was immediate. Carter decided to stay in the room, waiting and watching to see if he could find a rational explanation for the keys moving on their own. Then it starts again. The piano begins playing a melody while Carter is standing right there. As he watches, the heavy wooden chair tucked in front of the keys begins to slide backward across the floor, moving entirely on its own. For a moment, nothing moves. Then the realization hits. Carter didn't wait around for a third event. He ran out the front door, intending to spend the night at a friend's place. But as he was walking toward his car, he looked back at the house. Through the window, he saw the television screen flicker to life in the empty living room. Then the interior lights began to pulse and flicker rapidly. Carter eventually moved out for good, leaving the house behind. If the piano stopped when he got close, why did it start again while he was watching? At 10:22 a.m. on Saturday, August 12, 2023, the quiet of the Rustic Ridge neighborhood in Plum, Pennsylvania did not just break, it evaporated. A Ring doorbell camera across the street captured the exact second of the disaster. In the footage, the house at 141 Rustic Ridge Drive is there, solid, 2 stories, a family home. A fraction of a second later, it's gone. There is no fire first, no slow collapse, and no warning. The structure is replaced by a massive violent expansion of white and gray debris that shoots hundreds of feet into the air. The shockwave hits the camera, shaking the frame as the sound of the blast catches up. Roof shingles, insulation, and splintered wood rain down on the street. The 2 neighboring houses on either side are immediately hammered by the force. Their windows shatter, their walls cave in, and within moments, both are consumed by aggressive, fast-moving fires. The first 911 calls were frantic. Dispatchers were told the house had exploded, but when the first responders arrived, they found a crater. 18 different fire departments converged on the scene. The heat was so intense that 57 firefighters had to be treated for exhaustion. They weren't just fighting flames, they were digging through a massive pile of burning rubble, desperate to find anyone who might still be alive beneath the remains of the foundation. As the smoke began to clear, the names of those inside started to emerge. This was not just a collection of random individuals. This was the core of the local community. 6 people lost their lives in the blast. Heather Orovitz, 51, was the borough's community development director. She was a woman dedicated to the growth and safety of the town she lived in. Her husband, Paul Orovitz, 56, was with her. Paul survived the initial explosion but suffered severe burns over nearly his entire body. He was rushed to UPMC Mercy, where he fought for 4 days before he passed away. Michael Thomas, 57, was also in the house. He was the Plum Borough manager, a colleague of Heather's and a longtime public servant. Then there was Kevin Sabuna, 55. His family and neighbors didn't just see him as a construction worker. They called him the go-to guy. If a sink leaked or a door stuck, Kevin was the one who showed up with a toolbox. Finally, there was Casey Klontz, who was only 12 years old. Casey was known for his sense of humor and his deep devotion to his family. Keegan was a young athlete who loved football. In the days following the tragedy, his teammates gathered at their practice field. They took a knee at the 40-yard line because 40 was Keegan's jersey number. They hung his jersey on the goalpost in a silent tribute to a boy who was described as the perfect teammate. The human impact of that Saturday morning is difficult to measure. Kevin Sabuna's daughter was in Texas when she received a frantic call from her mother at 11:48 a.m. Her mother told her that Kevin was trapped in the basement of the house and that everything was on fire. She boarded the first flight she could find, but by the time she landed, the news had turned from a rescue mission to a recovery. Casey Klontz's wife also received a brief, terrifying call. Casey had managed to phone her to say that he, Keegan, and Kevin were trapped. Then the line went dead. It was the last time she would ever hear his voice. The survivors are left with a grief that is compounded by the loss of their physical surroundings. Kelly Sabuna, Kevin's wife, expressed the weight of the tragedy by explaining that she wasn't just losing a husband, she was losing her best friends and her entire social circle. Even though my girls moved away, this was our home, she said. These were all our best friends that passed away. I'm grieving the loss of all my friends and all of our homes. As the community mourned, the focus shifted to a single burning question. How does a house simply vanish? By July 2025, the families had filed lawsuits against 4 companies, including gas and utility providers. The legal filings present a specific theory of what happened that morning. The lawsuits claimed that methane gas from a ruptured pipeline had been leaking into the soil. Because methane is odorless and colorless, it can migrate through the ground and accumulate in low-lying areas like basements without anyone knowing it's there. The suit alleges that the gas built up in the Orovitz's basement over a period of time. On that Saturday morning, the Orovitzes had noticed something was wrong. Their water heater was making strange, uncharacteristic noises. They called Kevin Sabuna, their trusted neighbor, to come over and take a look. Casey and Keegan Klontz followed him over to help. Attorneys for the family stated that those strange noises from the water heater were likely caused by the external gas pressure already building up within the system. When the gas reached a high enough concentration, a single spark, perhaps from the water heater itself or a light switch, was all it took to trigger the massive explosion. The lawsuit argues that at multiple points leading up to the disaster, steps could have been taken to detect the leak and prevent the deaths of these 6 people. Today, the lot at 141 Rustic Ridge Drive is empty. It is a flat patch of grass where a home in a community once stood. Taylor Orovitz, who lost both of her parents that day, now wears the GPS coordinates of the house tattooed on her forearm. It is a permanent reminder of a place she can never go back to. She still asks the question that the entire neighborhood is struggling with. Why them? Why her parents? Why that specific morning? The official investigation into the Plum House explosion remains open as experts continue to analyze soil samples and pipeline integrity. While the legal battles and technical investigations move forward, the neighborhood is left to find a way to heal. Disasters like this remind us that life is fragile and that the things we take for granted, like the ground beneath our feet and the safety of our four walls, can change in an instant. The people of Rustic Ridge weren't just neighbors. They were a family. They looked out for each other. They helped each other with repairs, and they spent their Saturday mornings together. That bond is the only thing the explosion couldn't destroy. The lot is empty, but the memory of the people who live there is held tightly by the ones they left behind. They aren't just names in a report or faces on the news. They were the heart of a community that is still trying to find its way home. On an afternoon in early 1985, 18-year-old Kathleen Allen was at her job at a local grocery store when the telephone rang. The man on the other end of the line had a specific, devastating message. He claimed to be a friend of her boyfriend, Michael Carroll. He told Kathleen that Michael had been involved in a shooting and was in serious trouble. He wouldn't be coming home, the man said, but he could take her to where Michael was staying. Distraught and desperate for answers, Kathleen spoke to her manager and left work immediately. Witnesses in the parking lot saw her approach a man with a beard who was waiting by a car. After a brief conversation, she climbed into the passenger seat. The man got behind the wheel and the car pulled away. It was the last time Kathleen Allen was ever seen alive in public. To understand how Kathleen ended up in that car, you have to look back at the days leading up to that phone call. Kathleen and Michael had been living together in a motel room, living a quiet, unremarkable life. One evening around 10 p.m., Michael told Kathleen he had some business to take care of and would be back in the morning. He never returned. For 3 days, Kathleen waited, moving through her daily routine in a state of growing anxiety, until the phone call at the grocery store offered a lead she felt she couldn't ignore. The man in the car was not a friend of Michael's. He was a predator named Leonard Lake. Leonard Lake was born in San Francisco in 1945. To those outside his inner circle, he appeared to be an intelligent, if somewhat eccentric individual. However, the stability of his early life fractured at the age of 6 when his parents separated. He and his siblings were sent to live with their grandmother, an environment where Lake's darkest impulses began to manifest without anyone stepping in. During his youth, Lake's behavior was deeply predatory. He was known to dissolve small animals in chemicals and was caught taking illicit photographs of his own sister. Most disturbing were the reports that he coerced his siblings into sexual acts. Despite these clear warning signs of a developing sociopath, his grandmother reportedly failed to seek professional help or intervene in any meaningful way. These formative years didn't just harbor his fixations, they allowed them to rot and deepen. By the time he reached adulthood, Lake's interests shifted toward a radical and paranoid brand of survivalism. He became obsessed with the idea of an impending nuclear apocalypse. This wasn't just a hobby, it was a foundational worldview he used to justify his desire for control and isolation. Throughout the late 1970s and early 1980s, Lake moved between various properties, always attempting to construct fortified bunkers where he could retreat from society. In 1981, Lake placed an advertisement in a survivalist magazine. He wasn't looking for a friend, he was looking for a partner who shared his nihilistic outlook. The ad was answered by Charles Nunn, a native of Hong Kong and a former Marine who had been dishonorably discharged and had a history of legal trouble. The two men were a volatile match. They quickly began a cycle of crimes, including the theft of firearms. These activities eventually landed them in prison, but their brief sentences did nothing to deter them. Upon their release, they moved to a remote, wooded area in Wilseyville, California. It was here, on a property owned by Lake's ex-wife, that their shared fantasies began to take a physical, lethal form. With the help of unsuspecting local laborers, Lake and Nunn constructed a sophisticated bunker near a small cabin on the property. To the neighbors, it looked like a standard fallout shelter. Inside, however, the structure was designed for a far more sinister purpose. Lake outfitted the rooms with heavy locks, illegal weaponry, and a complex system of video recording equipment. He began filming what he called the Miranda Project, named after a character in a novel who is kidnapped and held captive. Lake's journals revealed a chilling philosophy. He believed that in the aftermath of a nuclear war, women would be a commodity to be owned and used.
Good evening. It's a Sunday in October, 22nd, 23rd, something like that. Very close to my 38th birthday. And I'm starting this tape without script or without any real organization of what I want to say. This tape What you're hearing now is going to be the lead-in of the various phases of construction of a building, which hopefully will be the first of a series of underground buildings. The main emphasis of the building, the whole justification for its expense and its effort, will be a hidden portion of it, a secret room, if we can call it that, that will house a cell, a jail cell, if you will. And the purpose of that cell, and the main purpose, hence, of the building, will be the imprisonment of a young lady who probably at this moment is unknown to me. What I want is an off-the-shelf sex partner. I want to be able to use a woman whenever and however I want. And when I'm tired or satiated or bored or not interested, I simply want to put her away, lock her up in a little room, get her out of my sight, out of my life. The advantages of such a situation are, of course, obvious and even beyond sexual. Such a woman, totally enslaved, would be useful for the mundane chores that I have to do, but I'm not particularly interested in doing. Clean house, washing dishes, etc. Slave, there's no way around it. Primarily a sexual slave.
Ohio, Kraska. It's being called the creepiest crime scene in America. A remote cabin where cops say some of the most gruesome serial killings in California history took place. Well, now Ed Miller's giving you an exclusive and very disturbing look inside this house of horrors.
First, they were kidnapped, then robbed, raped, and killed. 12 innocent victims, 3 women, 7 men, 2...
The disappearance of Kathleen Allen was part of a larger methodical pattern. Lake and Nung didn't just target young women, they targeted entire families to ensure no one would come looking for their primary victims. Their process often began with Michael Carroll, Kathleen's boyfriend. Lake and Nung had met Michael previously. They lured him to the Wellesleyville property under the guise of a job or a business deal. Once Michael was killed, they used his disappearance to bait Kathleen. By telling her Michael was injured or in hiding, they ensured she would come to them willingly. This was their standard operating procedure. They would kill the men, rob them, and then use the victims' keys and identification to enter their homes. They would tell the remaining family members that their loved ones were in trouble and needed help, luring them back to the remote cabin in the woods. Once on the property, the victims were trapped. The VHS tapes discovered later revealed the clinical, detached way the two men treated their captives. Victims were often given an ultimatum: comply with every demand and serve as a captive in the bunker or face immediate death. In reality, the choice was an illusion. No one was meant to leave the property alive. Lake and Nung used the victims' identities to pay bills and maintain the appearance that the missing people were still alive and simply traveling, buying themselves months at a time to continue their spree. The decade of horror came to an abrupt end in June 1985, not for a massive manhunt, but because of a minor shoplifting incident. Charles Nung was spotted stealing a $75 vise from a hardware store in San Francisco. When Lake attempted to pay for the item to settle the matter, police became suspicious. Upon questioning, Lake produced a driver's license in the name of Robin Stapley, a man who had been missing for weeks. The police took both men into custody. While sitting in the back of a patrol car, Leonard Lake made a final desperate choice to evade justice. He had a cyanide pill sewn into the lapel of his jacket. He swallowed the poison and died 4 days later in a hospital without ever confessing to the scale of his crimes. With Lake dead, the investigation shifted to the Wellesleyville property. What investigators found was a scene of industrial-scale murder. They discovered multiple vehicles belonging to missing persons in a burn pit behind the cabin. Forensic teams painstakingly sifted through the soil, uncovering approximately 40 pounds of charred and crushed human bone fragments. It was determined that these remains represented at least 11 different victims, though the true number is feared to be higher. Inside the bunker, they found the tools the men used, buckets filled with wedding rings, social security cards, and hundreds of hours of VHS tapes that documented the final moments of their victims. The evidence against Charles Nung was overwhelming. Although he fled to Canada shortly after Lake's arrest, he was eventually extradited back to California. In 1999, Charles Nung was convicted of 12 counts of first-degree murder. The trial was one of the longest and most expensive in California history, delayed for years by Nung's various legal maneuvers. He was sentenced to death and remains incarcerated at San Quentin State Prison. The Wilseyville property has since been cleared, but the memory of what occurred there remains a dark chapter. There was no grand motive behind the actions of Leonard Lake and Charles Nung beyond a depraved desire for total dominance over others. Kathleen Allen, Michael Carroll, and many others were not victims of a survivalist's war, but of two men who saw their human beings as nothing more than property. The bunker is gone now, leaving only the quiet woods of Calaveras County behind. A man was exploring the ruins of an abandoned building deep in a remote forest. The structure was decaying, filled with shadows and the sound of his own footsteps. He eventually found a set of narrow stairs leading down into the dark. He gets to the bottom of the basement and begins to pan his flashlight around the room. Then he stops.
Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un encore qui habite ici? Waouh, l'état de la cave. C'est quoi ça?
Paralyzed with fear, he freezes in place for several seconds. Standing directly in front of him is a tall, thin figure tucked into a doorway. It remains perfectly still, watching him with two bright, glowing eyes that reflect the light of his camera. He doesn't move, and neither does the creature. If you were standing in that basement, would you have stayed to see what happened next? The Thunder River Rapids ride at Dreamworld was designed for families. Since 1986, it was a kind of attraction where parents took toddlers aged 2 and up. They sat in circular, 6-person rafts that drifted through man-made rapids and dark tunnels. It was considered one of the safest, most relaxed rides in Australia's largest theme park. On Tuesday, October 25, 2016, that perception of safety vanished in exactly 30 seconds. The disaster began long before the rafts collided. It started with a mechanical failure that had become a routine nuisance for the park's maintenance team. The south water pump, which maintained the water levels necessary for the rafts to float safely, had already failed twice that morning. It had failed 5 times in the week leading up to the accident. Under Dreamworld's own safety guidelines, the ride should have been shut down for a total overhaul after the second failure in a single day. That did not happen. Each time the pump tripped, it was simply reset and the ride was reopened to the public. Just after 2 p.m., a group of family and friends from Canberra boarded Raft 5. The group included 32-year-old Kate Goodchild, her brother Luke Dorset, 35, and Luke's partner, 38-year-old Ruzi Aragi. They were joined by 42-year-old Cindy Lowe and her 10-year-old son, Kieran. Kate's 12-year-old daughter, Ebony, was also on board. Standing at the station was Kate's husband, Dave, who was holding their 8-month-old baby, watching them start the final leg of the ride. As Raft 5 approached the end of the course, the south water pump failed for the 3rd time that day. The impact was immediate. Without the pump pushing water into the upper channel, the water level of the unloading station dropped sharply and suddenly. The raft ahead of them, Raft 6, didn't have enough water to stay buoyant. It became beached, stuck on the heavy metal support struts that were now exposed above the receding waterline. It sat there, stationary, right at the point where the water meets the wooden conveyor belt. Raft 5 was already on that conveyor belt. It was being pulled out of the water and up the incline toward the station. The ride operators noticed the water drop. The lead operator reached for the control panel and pressed the conveyor stop button, but the system was designed with a fatal delay. From the moment that button was pressed, it took over 30 seconds for the massive heavy conveyor belt to actually grind to a halt. In those 30 seconds, the disaster became inevitable. The conveyor continued to move, indifferent to the button press. It pushed Raft 5 directly into the back of the stranded Raft 6. Because the conveyor kept moving underneath them, the two rafts began to pivot. They tilted violently upward, creating a vertical V-shape. The machinery did not stop. The conveyor belt, still moving during that 30-second window, began to pull Raft 5 down into the narrow gap between the wooden slats of the belt and the mixed metal support struts of the ride's frame. The fiberglass raft was not built to withstand that kind of mechanical force. It began to be ripped apart. Kate, Luke, Ruzi, and Cindy were caught in the primary drive machinery. At the unload station, there was a second emergency stop button. This button was capable of halting the entire system in just 2 seconds. For reasons that would later dominate the legal inquiry, neither operator pressed it. The two children, Ebony and Kieran, were seated at the very top of the tilting raft. As it flipped, they managed to cling to the edges long enough to reach the concrete platform. They were the only survivors from RAF 5. The timeline was captured in haunting detail by the park's CCTV. Investigators used the footage to count every second of the 30-second halt. It showed the exact moment the pump failed, the visible drop in the water level, and the slow-motion collision of the two rafts. The footage confirmed a grim reality. The disaster was preventable at multiple points. If the ride had been closed after the second pump failure, if the emergency stop had been pressed, or if the conveyor had a faster response time, the family would have walked off the ride. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Dave Turner, still holding his 8-month-old, saw the raft flip. He dived into the water, desperate to reach his wife, Kate. Dreamworld staff had to pull him back from the machinery. Minutes later, he was seen in the car park, shirtless and covered in mud. In a state of total shock, witnesses heard him calling out to the ride staff over and over, "Why didn't you stop the ride?" The impact on the family was total. Kim Dorsett, the mother of Kate and Luke, spoke to the media that afternoon in a state of disbelief. "I have 3 children and have lost 2 of them today," she said. "My whole family has been wiped out." She spoke of the tragedy of an 8-month-old girl who would grow up knowing her mother only through photographs. Years later, during the sentencing of Ardent Leisure, the parent company of Dreamworld, Kim stood in court. She shared a detail that had haunted her since the day of that accident. She told the court about the 4 words spoken by 12-year-old Ebony immediately after she scrambled to safety. "I could not find mommy." Kim described those words as a recurring nightmare that would stay with her until her dying breath. The legal consequences were significant. Ardent Leisure was fined 3.6 million Australian dollars, the largest fine ever handed down for a workplace safety breach in Queensland at the time. The coroner's report was scathing, pointing to systemic failure in safety culture and maintenance. It was revealed that the ride safety systems were rudimentary and had not been properly updated in 30 years. In 2018, the Thunder River Rapids ride was demolished. It wasn't just torn down, the entire site was buried in concrete to ensure it could never be used again. The tragedy at Dreamworld remains a stark reminder of what happens when maintenance becomes a suggestion rather than a rule. It wasn't a freak accident or an act of God. It was a 30-second window where the machinery worked exactly the way it was built, but the people in charge of it failed to act. Safety isn't just about the buttons you press, it's about the warnings you choose to ignore. One missed repair cost 4 lives.
21st, 1997. History of the Prophet Joseph Smith. In 5th through 8th grade class. How anxious I am for Heavenly Father's Spirit to touch your minds and hearts.
If the prophet told you to marry, you obeyed. It didn't matter who the man was, and it certainly didn't matter how old you were. This was the foundational law of the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the FLDS. For the better part of a century, this group operated from a tiny Utah town called Short Creek, staying largely beneath the radar while enforcing a system of absolute psychological and physical control. Most recently, the organization was governed by Warren Jeffs. He preached a chilling doctrine that plural marriage was not just a religious preference, but a divine requirement for entering the kingdom of heaven. As a self-proclaimed prophet, Jeffs was seen as the sole voice of God on earth. Under his direction, women were treated as pawns in a spiritual game of chess. Hundreds of girls were forced into marriages with men old enough to be their grandfathers, all under the belief that their submission was the only path to eternal salvation. The reality inside the FLDS is among the darkest chapters in modern history. Like many predatory groups, they were experts at keeping their secrets. They destroyed records, sealed away media, and ensured that the horrors occurring behind closed doors stayed there. I will be diving into the full history of the FLDS very soon, but for now we have to look at how these deeply guarded secrets eventually collided with the most unlikely place imaginable, American reality television. In 2008, Fox premiered a game show called The Moment of Truth. The premise was simple but inherently brutal. Contestants were asked deeply personal, controversial questions in front of a live studio audience for a growing cash prize. But there was a catch. Before the cameras started rolling, each player was hooked up to a polygraph. Their answers on stage were measured against that physiological data. If you told the truth, the money increased. If the polygraph determined you were lying, you lost everything, and your most shameful secrets were broadcast to millions of viewers. It was a show designed for high-stakes exposure, but in August 2010, the stakes became far more serious. A contestant named Melanie Williams took the stage for the 9th episode of the 2nd season. Unlike the typical players looking for a quick payday, Melanie brought with her a history that the show's producers were likely unprepared for. She had grown up inside the FLDS. She had lived through the atrocities committed against the women and children at Short Creek, and she was there to speak.
Yeah. while living in a polygamous community, did you know of any underage girls who were married to adult men?
Yeah.
That answer is true.
But nothing could stop her.
To this day, Season 2, Episode 9 is considered lost media. The broadcast has been almost entirely scrubbed from existence. All that remains of her debut is a brief promotional trailer that hints at the shocking nature of her revelations. However, Melanie returned for Episode 10, and that footage does survive in its entirety. It was during this appearance that she reached a point no other contestant had ever touched. She was standing before the final $500,000 question. Host Mark Wahlberg paused, giving her a moment to back out. He warned her that the next question would be the most difficult of all. Despite the visible weight at the moment, Melanie chose to continue.
I'm gonna do it for my dad. I'm gonna go for it.
You're going for it? Holy moly.
Are you okay?
It's a tough question, excuse me. But it's a tough question for me. It's a tough question.
As the question was read, tears began to well in her eyes. Sitting beside her was her father, who looked on with a strange expression of confusion. He seemed unable to grasp why she was reacting this way, perhaps wondering what else could possibly be left to reveal after everything she had already admitted.
For $500,000, Melanie Williams. Question 21. Do you believe your father, as an adult, has ever had sexual relations with a minor?
Yes.
That answer is true.
When the truth was finally aired, the audience erupted in shock. Melanie sat in a stunned, heavy silence. Her father's response to the revelation only added to the surreal, haunting atmosphere of the studio. It was a moment where the private trauma of a cult was suddenly stripped bare on a stage meant for entertainment. 4 months after the broadcast, in January 2011, Melanie posted to her personal blog to address the lingering questions about her time on the show. In a post dated January 7th, she dropped a final devastating detail. She revealed that her father had lied on the air during his own segment. The girl they had been discussing during the show wasn't 17, as he claimed to the cameras. Her name was Joy, and she was only 14 years old. Despite this public admission of a crime, there is no record of Melanie's father ever being investigated or charged. Melanie herself stopped posting updates shortly after that blog entry. Even years later, this footage remains one of the most haunting things ever shown on mainstream TV. It is highly likely that this specific incident helped accelerate the show's eventual cancellation. Even if episode 9 is never recovered, Melanie Williams achieved something remarkable. She used the sensationalist game show to expose the inner workings of one of the world's most secretive cults. She brought light to a group that spent a century hiding its history of abuse behind the claim that they were simply following the will of God. If you found the reality of these cases disturbing, take a moment to reset. We are moving into the next case now, and it's even more disturbing. Something started to go wrong in October 1999 in the south end of Fort Worth, Texas. People began noticing a strange smell drifting through the air. At first, it was faint, easy to ignore, something you might pass off as a bad trash day or spoiled food nearby. But over time, it didn't go away. It grew stronger. Within days, that smell spread. It pushed into homes, lingered in businesses, and drifted across nearby parks. People couldn't escape it. The odor was thick, sour, and overwhelming. Those who experienced it described it as nauseating, like something had been left to rot for far too long. Residents began calling the authorities, trying to figure out what was happening. The smell hadn't slowly built over time. It seemed to appear almost overnight, and with each passing day, it only got worse. Eventually, attention turned to a building at the corner of Hemphill and West Fogg Street. It had once been a small neighborhood grocery store known as Mexa's Supermarket. The family that ran it had served the community for years. Locals knew the place. It had been part of the area for a long time, but now the doors were shut. The building sat empty. No lights, no movement, just silence. The family was gone, and the store had been left abandoned. Whatever was causing the smell was coming from inside. When officials finally entered the building, what they found was far worse than anyone expected. Inside, the store had completely broken down. What had once been shelves of food was now something unrecognizable. Meat and produce had rotted into thick, blackened sludge. Packaging had split open. Liquids had leaked and spread across the floors. Milk and frozen goods had ruptured after weeks of uncontrolled fermentation, leaving behind a foul chemical-like stench. The air itself had changed. It was heavy, toxic, almost impossible to breathe. The natural breakdown of all that organic material had altered the environment inside the building, creating conditions that made it dangerous to even stand there for long. And then there was the infestation. At some point, the decay had drawn in insects and rodents, but with no one there to stop it, the problem grew out of control. Maggots spread across the floors, roaches covered walls, shelves, and ceilings. Rats moved freely through the store, and flies filled the air in such massive numbers that they formed thick, shifting clouds. Workers later reported that when they first stepped inside, they could barely see more than a few feet in front of them. Everything inside the building was alive. What had once been a normal grocery store had turned into a full-scale biohazard. Investigators later determined the building had been left in this state for nearly 3 months. As the situation became clear, the Fort Worth Health Department stepped in and officially declared the site a public health hazard. A cleanup had to be done, but even that presented a serious problem. Under normal circumstances, a building in that condition might be demolished or burned, but here, that wasn't possible. The infestation had grown so severe that destroying the structure would have sent millions of insects and rodents scattering into the surrounding neighborhood. The contamination wouldn't end, it would spread. So instead, a crew was brought in to clean it manually, wearing full hazmat suits and oxygen tanks. Workers entered the building and began the process piece by piece. Rotting food had to be collected, bagged, and removed by hand. Every surface had to be disinfected. The entire structure had to be fumigated. All of this was done while standing inside swarms of flies and surrounded by infestation on every side. It wasn't a quick process. The cleanup took nearly an entire month. Day after day, workers returned to that building, slowly removing what had been left behind. By December, the store was finally cleared out. The shelves were empty. The waste was gone. But even then, something remained. The smell never fully disappeared. Years later, the building was eventually reopened under a new name. On the outside, it looked like a normal store again. Customers came and went. Business resumed, but some people who entered claimed the odor was still there, faint but unmistakable. One online review posted more than a decade after the original incident described it in simple terms. According to them, the place still smelled like death. Most of what exists today from inside that building comes from a short segment featured in a 2010 documentary. The footage shows only a brief glimpse of the conditions inside, just enough to give an idea how bad it was. But according to people who saw the original news coverage at the time, it was far worse than what survives today. Some described windows so completely covered in insects that they appeared blacked out, entire surfaces moving, shifting with roaches and flies. A scene so overwhelming that it stayed with people long after they saw it. One viewer later wrote that the images gave them recurring nightmares, not just because of what was shown, but because of how real it was, the scale of it, the smell they imagined, the idea of stepping inside that space and not being able to escape it. Even now, only about a minute of footage is publicly available. The rest, if it still exists at all, has never resurfaced. It sits somewhere in archives, lost to time or possibly gone entirely, and considering what was found inside that building, it may be better if it stays that way. A row of Halloween skulls is lined up along a brick fence. A woman stands nearby, adjusting the decorations with her back turned to the wall. Then it happens. One of the skulls in the middle of the row slowly begins to turn. It doesn't shake or shift randomly. It rotates smoothly to the side, stopping when it's facing directly toward her. The rest of the skulls don't move at all. According to the family, there were no strings or moving parts attached to any of them. And if it was wind, nothing else in the row reacts, only that one. If nothing touched it, what made it turn? Let me know what you think. You're driving through Shelikov, Russia, when your windshield suddenly explodes. There is no warning, just a violent crack and a heavy metal object embedded in the glass, inches from your face. A stray hunk of iron, likely kicked up by the tires of a passing truck, becomes a high-speed projectile in a split second. At those speeds, road debris carries enough force to punch straight through the front of the car and into the seats. The driver somehow stayed on the road, and miraculously, no one was hit. But looking at the size of the hole, it's clear how close this came to being a fatal accident. Why I'm scared of elevators.
Hola, hola, hola. Estoy viva, estoy bien. Quieta, 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 mi amor. Quieta, quieta, cariño. Quieta, quieta, mi amor. Estate tranquilita, mi amor. Estate tranquilita, cariño. Estate tranquilita. Estate tranquilita, mi vida. Estate tranquilita. Estate tranquilita, no pasa nada, no pasa nada. Estate tranquilita, que no pasa nada.
A cyclist is riding along a narrow, crumbling trail on the edge of a cliff in Spain. The path is barely wide enough for her tires, with a sheer drop just inches to her right. Suddenly, her front wheel catches on a loose rock. She loses her balance and slides sideways off a ledge. She tumbles down a steep, jagged slope, but it isn't a straight drop down. The rocky terrain catches her and breaks her fall before she hits the bottom of the ravine. The angle of the hillside is the only thing that kept her from a free fall. The rider, Cecilia Cepena, later posted an apology for not wearing a helmet during the trip. She admitted the fall changed her perspective on the risks she was taking. Looking at the footage, you can see the exact moment her tires lose the dirt and she heads into empty air. This has to be the worst ladder placement in history, right? A container lorry in Mudager, India, pulls out to overtake a slower truck and miscalculates the space. As the driver tries to get back into his lane, the heavy trailer begins to sway and slide sideways across the narrow road. The back of the lorry fishtails across the pavement, narrowly missing two oncoming motorcycles before slamming into a car parked on the shoulder. The trailer scrapes down the entire side of the car, avoiding a full head-on collision. While the people inside the parked car walked away unhurt, the lorry driver and his helper were both injured in the wreck. Looking at the metal peeled back from the car door, it's clear how close this came to a direct hit.
What is the location of your emergency?
11250 East Colonial Drive.
11250 East Colonial Drive, and what's going on there?
Yes. There's a man wearing all black with a ski mask. He has a weapon on his side. It looks like a long knife. And he has a dog. He just stole a lot of merchandise. And we approached him. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So we approached. Happened. It's currently happened. He's still in the parking lot.
Okay. All right. You said he's armed and wearing a black ski mask?
Yeah. He seemed intoxicated as well.
The deputy runs toward a man in a black ski mask and all black clothing in the Walmart parking lot on East Colonial Drive. The suspect stands by a silver car, holding a dog on a leash with one hand while a larger knife is visible in a sheath at his hip. "Get on the ground now. Get on the ground. Get on the ground," the deputy shouts. The The man stays on his feet, staring at the officer and ignoring the commands as more sirens approach. The deputy keeps his weapon level, repeating, "Get on the ground or you will be shot. Get on the ground." The man remains upright, his posture stiffening as he refuses to drop. The officer gives several more warnings before firing. The clicking of the taser fills the air, but the probes fail to stop the man. Instead, he immediately drops his hand toward his waistband.
3211, I'm 1012 at Lake Virgin 50.
Hey, get on the ground now! Get on the ground now! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground! Get on the ground or you will be shot! Get on the ground! He's uncooperative. Can I get someone, Get on the ground or you're gonna get tased! Get on the ground or you're gonna get tased, bro! Get on the ground or you're gonna get tased, bro! Get on the ground! And you better not let that dog out. Get on the ground. Get on the ground. You will be tased. Stop resisting. Get on the ground. You're gonna get tased, bro. Okay, deploy. Hey, don't reach. Don't reach. Do not reach. Shots fired, shots fired. Do not reach! Do not reach! Do not reach! Turn around! Turn around! Turn around! Do not reach, bro! Do not reach! Do not reach for anything, or you will be shot again. Get it? Turn around! Turn around! Shots fired, shots fired. Get out!
You got him? Go help somebody recover. Get down! Get down! Get down! Go ahead, somebody.
Keep your hands on your head. Do it now.
Put your hands on your head.
Get on your stomach. Do it now.
Unit at 11250, East London Drive, Lake Virgin 50. Signal 4050 for unit Lake Virgin 50.
Someone's gonna have to taser you. Get down!
You get shot again, bro.
Where you got it?
All right.
Wait, guys, wait.
Over the leg.
Wait,
Over the leg.
Okay. Give us your arm.
Okay.
There you go.
You got his legs? All right. We can check where he's shot. Yeah. Okay.
You got it. Bend your arm. You got it?
I got this one.
Okay.
We got him on the ground. All right.
Okay, we need the other arm.
Officers move in as a team, one covering with a sidearm while others grab the man's arms to pull them behind his back. They quickly secure his wrists in handcuffs and search his waistband, recovering 2 knives from his person. They immediately begin cutting away his clothing to find the entry wounds and check for bleeding, while calling for an ambulance. The suspects survive the encounter with non-life-threatening injuries. The footage ends with the 2 knives lying on the pavement a few feet away from the discarded merchandise.
Zahamowali go.
Zatrzymał się?
Chyba go zapali. Ktoś go tam złapał. Ale jedno. Zatrzymał się? Chyba poleciał dalej.
The climber is making a winter ascent on Mount Risey in Poland when a single misplaced step sends him sliding down the frozen slope. In the footage, he immediately tries to react, but the icy terrain makes it impossible to regain his footing. As he picks up speed, he loses his ice axe, the tool he needs to dig into the snow and stop the slide. Without it, he has no way to break his fall and continues to tumble down the snowy face until the ground finally levels out. The climber walked away from the fall with only a minor injury to his little finger and was able to leave the area on his own. Looking at the long trail left in the snow, you can see exactly how far he slid without any way to stop. At an old hotel in Arizona, a receptionist's night shift just took a strange turn. His coworker called him into one of the rooms to witness something that shouldn't be possible.
What the? Nah.
Yeah, cause let me hit it now. And
yeah.
The bed is empty, the sheets are tucked, but something is clearly moving underneath the heavy white fabric. It isn't a small insect or a draft. It's a distinct, solid bulge that shifts and darts across the mattress, as if it's looking for a way out. Every time the man reaches out to straighten the linens, activity starts again. When he finally loses his patience and slams his hand down on the spot, the movement instantly vanishes into thin air. He searched the entire frame, but there's nothing there. What do you think is hiding under those sheets? Tampa resident Jeffrey Heim had only been swimming in the MYUU River for a few minutes when something slammed into him with such force that at first he thought he had been hit by a boat. The impact was sudden, violent, and completely unexpected, turning what should have been a normal moment in the water into a fight for survival. By sheer coincidence, a drone was flying overhead at the exact moment the incident unfolded, capturing the entire encounter on camera. While the footage isn't perfectly clear, one thing is undeniable. A violent struggle was taking place in the water. The video shows Jeffrey thrashing and fighting desperately, trying to break free as the surface churns around him. Within seconds, it became clear what he was up against. An alligator had attacked him. The footage shows Jeffrey kicking and pulling himself forward, doing everything he could to escape as he swam frantically toward the riverbank. Every movement looked like a race against time, knowing that if he slowed down for even a moment, the outcome could have been very different. Somehow, against the odds, he made it out alive. Later, Jeffrey recalled that the alligator was roughly 10 feet long, a massive animal capable of overpowering almost anything in the water. The injuries he suffered reflected just how close the encounter was to becoming fatal. He required 34 stitches to his head due to a skull injury and had multiple bite marks across his body from the attack. Despite the severity of what happened, Jeffrey survived, something that doesn't happen often in encounters like this, but the experience left a lasting impact. He now says he will never go near that river again. Can't say I blame him. On February 23, 2026, late in the morning, what started as a routine moment in traffic quickly spiraled into a violent confrontation. A pregnant woman was driving when another motorist became upset after being honked at, something witnesses described as a normal part of traffic flow. According to those who saw the incident, the other driver began acting aggressively almost immediately. She repeatedly slowed down and hit her brakes in front of the pregnant woman's vehicle, creating a dangerous situation on the road. Instead of calming down, the behavior continued to escalate as tensions between the two drivers grew. The situation took a more serious turn when the suspect suddenly cut across lanes, stopped her vehicle, and got out. Witnesses say she walked directly toward the pregnant woman's car, turning what had been a road dispute into physical confrontation. Authorities report that the suspect climbed onto the hood of the vehicle and opened the driver's door, confronting the woman inside. At that point, the incident crossed from aggressive driving into an alleged assault. As this was happening, another driver who had been nearby and witnessed the entire situation decided to step in and help. The woman, described as older, exited her own vehicle in an attempt to intervene and calm things down. However, police say she was also attacked during the incident, suffering scratches and being struck by the suspect. Despite the chaos, the suspect did not leave the scene. When officers with the Orlando Police Department arrived, they were able to quickly identify her based on detailed descriptions provided by both victims and witnesses. As officers attempted to take her into custody, the situation escalated once again. According to police, the suspect resisted arrest and became physically combative. During the struggle, she allegedly kicked and bit one of the officers while they were trying to restrain her.
Putting you in cuffs, you're going to be detained until I determine otherwise. You understand?
I'll play the on, no.
Don't resist me.
Tell me why. Tell me why. First of all, tell me why.
Don't resist. You're being held for battery. Okay. Do not hold. Do not resist.
That's I am. Stop.
Don't bite me!
Get the off of me!
Turn around!
After being subdued, the suspect was identified as 37-year-old Mandolyn Schaffer Brockwell. She was taken into custody and transported to jail. Authorities charged her with multiple offenses stemming from the incident. Those charges include resisting an officer with violence, battery on a person 65 years or older, aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer, and burglary of a conveyance with assault or battery. What began as a minor disagreement on the road quickly escalated into a dangerous situation involving multiple victims and a physical confrontation. This dashcam footage captures something truly terrifying with this bus in front of them.
কেমনে সেভ করলো নাকি ইচ্ছা করে করলো?
ও সেভ করেছে, তুমি কি করছো? 9:13 এই জায়গার ভিডিওটা নিয়ে রাখতে হবে তো।
This was too close for comfort and serves as further evidence of the severity of the bus driver issue in certain nations. The green bus driver was traveling far too quickly, and the white bus driver simply turned without looking. He deserves praise for at least successfully avoiding him. Still, that probably wouldn't have been required if he had been traveling at a regular pace. In the late summer 2024, a brief piece of security footage from a residential neighborhood in Omaha, Nebraska began drawing serious attention from both investigators and the community. At first, the video seemed to show something tragically familiar, a woman arriving home after what appeared to be an ordinary day. She pulled into her driveway expecting nothing more than the routine end to an outing. What happened next unfolded in a matter of seconds and permanently altered that sense of normalcy. As soon as her vehicle came to a stop, multiple individuals approached with alarming speed and coordination. They didn't hesitate or appear uncertain. They knew exactly what they wanted and how long they had to get it. Within moments, they had taken her designer handbag, a bank deposit bag, and even her engagement ring. Then just as quickly as they arrived, they were gone. The entire confrontation was over almost as soon as it began, but the emotional damage left behind was far from brief. Initially, the crime looked like a spur-of-the-moment robbery, the kind of thing often attributed to opportunity and bad luck. But as deputies with the Douglas County Sheriff's Office began examining the case more closely, that explanation quickly fell apart. The deeper they looked, the clearer it became that this was not random. It was deliberate, calculated, and planned well in advance. Investigators uncovered that the suspects had traveled an extraordinary distance to commit the crime. Authorities believe the group drove close to 900 miles from Texas to Nebraska. This wasn't a coincidence or a spontaneous road trip gone wrong. The suspects allegedly targeted smaller Midwestern cities on purpose, operating under the assumption that they would attract less attention, face fewer immediate connections between crimes, and be able to leave town long before anyone realized a pattern existed. Omaha, investigators say, was selected intentionally. Evidence later revealed that the group spent significant amounts of time sitting in banked parking lots throughout the city, especially along major commercial routes. Cell phone data showed them waiting for extended periods, sometimes 20 minutes, sometimes nearly 40. They weren't in a hurry, they weren't improvising. They were watching, observing foot traffic, studying routines, and identifying people who appeared to be carrying cash, deposits, or valuables. Once a potential target was chosen, they followed that person, sometimes for miles, all the way home. The driveway robbery captured on camera was the final step in a process that began long before the victim ever realized she was being watched. It was a result of patience and surveillance, not impulse. The home security footage became a critical piece of evidence, but early progress in the case was frustratingly slow. The suspect vehicle captured in a video had no visible license plate, a detail investigators believe was intentional. Without a plate number, detectives were left with only a general description of the car. Leads were thin and immediate identification was impossible. Despite the challenges, the case never stalled. Investigators continued working quietly, methodically, collecting small pieces of information and waiting for the right break. That break eventually came through a combination of technology and persistence. License plate reader systems across Omaha, along with data from the police department's real-time operations center, helped narrow down potential vehicles that matched the suspect car's movements and appearance. After careful review, investigators were able to isolate the specific vehicle believed to be connected to the robbery. That discovery opened the door to cooperation with law enforcement agencies in Texas, where additional records and information began filling in the missing pieces. Once the vehicle link was established, investigators moved quickly to subpoena cell phone records associated with the suspects. The data told a revealing story. It showed consistent travel patterns between Texas and multiple Midwestern states, including Nebraska. More importantly, it placed the suspects near banks, ATMs, and financial institutions in Omaha at times that aligned with witness statements and surveillance footage. What once looked like a single terrifying incident was now clearly a part of a larger organized operation. Authorities believe the group followed a repeatable formula: select a city, spend time watching financial locations, identify a target, follow them home, strike quickly, leave town. The precision of that method and the confidence behind it is what investigators found most disturbing. It suggested the suspects believed that distance alone would shield them from consequences.
Group that specifically travels from Texas around the Midwest to focus on banks and ATM machines in order to find their victim.
In October 2024, one of the suspects, 21-year-old Marco Penny, was extradited from Houston to Douglas County. He was charged with 2 felony offenses related to the Omaha robbery. Afterward, he was released on bond and fitted with an ankle monitor. Another suspect, 19-year-old Brad Folsom, is expected to face separate charges in Texas before being transferred to Nebraska. Authorities have stated that at least 2 additional individuals connected to the case remain at large. For the victim, the aftermath extended far beyond the loss of valuables. Being confronted in your own driveway, a space meant to symbolize safety and privacy, fundamentally changes how you move through the world. Everyday routines begin to feel exposed. Simple actions like pulling into your driveway or unloading your car take on an entirely different weight when you realize how closely you are being watched. Investigators stress that crimes like this aren't just about stolen property, they're about restoring a sense of security to people who suddenly understand how vulnerable they were. Douglas County Sheriff Aaron Hansen emphasized that message publicly, making it clear that these cases are pursued relentlessly, even if it takes months or years to bring everyone involved to justice. The message extends in 2 directions. To the public, it's reassurance that law enforcement does not forget or abandon these cases. To organized criminal groups, it's a warning. Crossing state lines does not erase responsibility.
Sure that we're sending a message not only to the innocent moms in Douglas County that we're going to pursue these guys relentlessly until they're in custody. We also want to send the message to those crime groups. Don't waste your time coming to
The footage remains unsettling because it reveals how methodically some crimes truly are. It shows how patience and planning can turn an ordinary moment into a life-altering event. It also highlights how collaboration between agencies and states can slowly dismantle even the most confident criminal strategies. What lingers most is the contrast: a mother returning home, strangers watching from a distance, 2 paths crossing in a single moment that reshape lives. The camera doesn't just capture a crime, it captures the quiet truth that danger doesn't always arrive in chaos. Sometimes it follows silently, waits carefully, and strikes only when it believes no one will ever connect the story. In the middle of a brutal winter storm on Ben Nevis, Britain's highest peak, a group of Royal Marines was pushing through a training exercise in some of the most hostile conditions on Earth. Winds were howling at gale force 8 and visibility had dropped to a mere meter, creating a whiteout that swallowed everything in sight. Through the blinding snow, the team stumbled upon a sight that looked more like a ghost than a man. A climber was found curled into a ball in the snow, motionless and freezing. When the Marines reached him, they found his face covered in solid blocks of ice, his body rapidly succumbing to the sub-zero temperatures.
Fingers down. Fingers down. Fingers down.
Knowing he was only minutes away from death, the troops acted with military precision. They fashioned a makeshift stretcher out of their own equipment and began a grueling descent down the mountain, battling the wind and ice to keep the man alive. The Dutch section commander later remarked that if they hadn't crossed paths with him at that exact moment, he certainly would not have survived the night. It is a chilling reminder how quickly the mountains can turn into a frozen tomb and how a single chance encounter can be the only thing standing between the climber and an icy grave.
Is he delivering pizza?
That's what I say. Cause
You
you
know who
don't,
that is?
imagine you don't want to go all the round, maybe.
Shish, it's 19 pieces.
Does
man.
it look like he has a pizza delivery?
It ain't DiGiorno.
You can see it, Kitty?
Well,
Domino's, 30 minutes or less.
You have. I'm impressed, Captain.
Yeah.
She's good at the whole film.
That's
Scary.
every person on the floor in here. Something.
Maybe he's going to deliver to the boat, the ice boaters.
Could you imagine DoorDash?
When a man pedaled a bike across the frozen Navesink River, Red Bank employees on break couldn't believe what they saw. This led to incredulity, swearing, and jokes about a pizza delivery gone wrong. Gotta respect the hustle though, right?
He's on a bicycle in a river.
That's incredible.
He does not have a wetsuit on. He's an idiot.
What's he got in the back? Is it a pizza?
I got the best
commentary.
This guy.
Uh-oh, here they come. Uh-oh.
It's Mr.
Is he delivering pizza?
That's what I say. Cause
You
you
know who
don't
that is? That's
imagine he don't want to go all the round, maybe.
Shish, it's 19 piece.
Does it look like he has a pizza delivery?
It ain't DiGiorno.
You can see it, Katie?
Well,
it's Domino's, 30 minutes or less.
You have. I'm impressed, Captain.
Yeah.
Just pick up the whole film.
Wow, that's
Scary.
every person on the floor in here.
On the afternoon of Monday, September 8th, 2025, what began as a routine patrol in Ashtabula, Ohio, quickly escalated into a deadly chain of events. At approximately 2:41 p.m., a deputy with the Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office noticed a red motorcycle traveling near the intersection of Dwight Avenue and East 48th Street. The motorcycle was later confirmed to be operated by 54-year-old Jerry Pegram. When the deputy attempted to initiate a traffic stop, Pegram refused to comply and instead accelerated away, triggering a pursuit through the area. As the chase continued, additional law enforcement units joined in. Over the course of several minutes, 3 more deputies from the Ashtabula County Sheriff's Office became involved, along with an Ohio State Highway Patrol trooper who followed behind with authorization to assist if Pegram abandoned the motorcycle and fled on foot. According to radio traffic, the pursuit remained relatively controlled. Speeds were reported as low to moderate, and traffic in the area was described as minimal, reducing the immediate risk to the public. Despite this, deputies repeatedly observed Pegram throwing items from the motorcycle while riding. These objects were described at different moments as small packages in plastic baggies, raising concerns about what he may have been attempting to discard during the chase.
Going through a private property, which is right here next to Grand Road.
Going through private property, Graham.
Okay, south on Stanhope, speeds are 54.
Southbound on San Jose Street 54.
¿Qué se pasa? Go boy!
Right so forward. How to do a stop.
Approaching the answer, coming to a stop.
After approximately 22 minutes, the pursuit came to an abrupt end. At around 3:03 p.m., deputies reported that Pegram had crashed his motorcycle near the intersection of Anderson Road and Stanhope-Kelligsville Road in Denmark Township. Rather than surrendering, Pegram got up from the wreck and ran into a wooded area just north of Anderson Road. Deputies followed him into the trees where the situation became increasingly volatile. One officer made contact with Pegram and the two briefly struggled as the officer attempted to take him into custody. A second officer arrived moments later and deployed a taser, but it failed to incapacitate him.
do it! Do not do it! Stop!
As deputies continued trying to restrain Pegram, they reported seeing him reach underneath his clothing. Officers stated that Pegram began manipulating what appeared to be a black handgun. In the 10 seconds that followed, one officer shouted a warning, yelling "gun, gun, gun," alerting others on scene to the immediate threat. Almost instantly, multiple officers discharged their firearms, striking Pegram several times.
Shots fired. Shots fired.
Everybody
Shots
good?
fired.
Everybody good? We're good. Everybody good?
Verify the staff.
Anybody hit? I'm good. I'm good. Move in the cup and secure the dog. Good parents. You good?
I don't know.
I got a firearm. Are you hit?
No, I'm okay.
You started pulling through. Yeah. I watched.
You pointed it right at me.
Yeah, I know. Anybody calling out yet? I'm good. I called shots fired. Everybody good? Everybody good? All right. I'm loading up the dog. Cuff him up. Yeah, bud. Tell me some medical. What? Start medical. All right.
Keep breathing.
You good, brother?
Still moving.
All right. All right, we gotta get him on his back. All right. SO has EMS en route.
Yeah.
6 is secured. The shots fired. I have 161.
I'll go get a med kit.
All right,
There's a handle, the butt of it.
there's a handle here.
My taser's over here somewhere. I dropped it when he pointed the gun at me.
It's right here, right here. Correct.
Oh shit. Lieutenant Johns is coming in.
All right, all right.
Roll over now! No! Do not do it!
Stop!
Do not do it!
Stop! Shots fired, shots fired.
Everybody good? Everybody good?
Anybody hit?
Good. I'm good. Move in the cup and secure the dog.
I don't know.
I got a firearm.
No, I'm okay.
1991, are you out there checking?
Everybody call it out yet?
I'm good. I called shots fired. Let's cuff him up.
Yeah, gloves.
H9 they have EMS en route.
Good breathing.
I can't talk to you.
Still moving.
All right, we gotta get him on his back.
To his back.
SO has EMS en route.
Yeah.
6 is secured. The shots fired. Well, I have 161.
I'll go get him. I'll go get him. There's a handle, the butt of it.
There's a handle here. We have 161. Goes on 6.
I couldn't copy. You have a 61?
Right here. Correct.
Lieutenant John is coming in.
All right. All right. What do you guys want with this firearm? I unloaded it at the least.
Once the shooting stopped, deputies moved in, placed him in handcuffs, and attempted to render medical aid. Despite those efforts, Pegram was pronounced dead at the scene. After the incident, officers recovered a firearm from a holster on Pegram's person. The weapon was secured, rendered safe, and later documented and collected by agents from the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation. The scene was turned over for further investigation, marking the end of a pursuit that began as a traffic stop and ended in a fatal confrontation deep in the woods. In this video, we are looking at a very strange event caught on a door camera outside an apartment complex in Southern California. Jose Gonzalez shared the footage, which was recorded by a family friend. At first, the scene looks like a typical quiet night in the suburbs. However, something absolutely bizarre emerges from the darkness under the stairs. A tiny mysterious figure walking upright on two legs appears out of nowhere. As a resident walks past the area, the small creature presses its body flat against the wall, as if it's desperately trying to stay hidden from view. The figure is wearing what looks like a tiny robe or a dark cloak. Its movements are described as being eerily similar to a human, yet it's far too small to be a person. After the woman passes by, the figure quickly slips between the steps and vanishes into the shadows. Jose believes this might be a duende, which is a legendary creature from Latin American folklore known for hiding in the corners of buildings. I feel terrible for the woman in the video because she had no idea that something so unsettling was crouching just inches away from her. This is why I always use a swift motion to get inside my house at night. Whether this is a physical animal or something paranormal, is a somber mystery that has left many viewers completely baffled. It was just past 5 p.m. on November 4th, 2025 in Louisville, Kentucky. The sky looked normal, but things were about to take a dark turn. Thousands of people at the UPS Worldport hub were busy getting planes ready for the night. One of those planes was UPS Flight 2976. This MD-11 fighter was scheduled for a routine trip to Dallas-Fort Worth. On board were 3 very experienced crew members. These veterans knew the heavy cargo and the precision needed for the flight. The plane moved slowly across the ground as the engines hummed. Controllers gave the all-clear for takeoff on runway 17R. At first, the climb was smooth, then a massive mechanical roar broke the silence. In this video, you can see the moment the disaster begins.
Ебать, все загорело.
¡Oh my God!
Ay, pinga.
¡Corre para atrás, papi! ¿Viste? Te lo estoy diciendo, Dios mío.
Security cameras from the area captured the plane pitching hard to the left. A strange glow appeared under the wing. Suddenly, a large piece of the jet broke away. The left engine had completely detached from the wing. The plane was only a few hundred feet up and moving at 150 knots. There was no time to fix the problem. The massive shadow of the jet banged low over buildings near the airport. Then came a blinding flash and a wall of fire. I feel terrible for the families of the 3 crew members who died. Several people on the ground lost their lives too. Warehouses and cars were swallowed by flames. Investigators found that a metal part called an engine pylon failed. This caused the engine to fall off mid-flight. UPS had to ground their entire MD-11 fleet after this. It's a scary reminder that even with modern technology, a few seconds can change everything. Thanks for watching. Stay vigilant, friends.